On sale in January, Nemesis Reloaded from Our Daddy and Jorge Jimenez. Imagine the playboy billionaire was the city's worst nightmare. How would the cops take him in?
This is sick, not the good kind of sick.
Also on sale, a brand new Magic Order story, The American Jesus Finale, Prodigy, The Icarus Society, Collected Edition, and Nightclub Issue 2 for only $1.99. $1.99? We must be mad!
Sean Murphy, how's it going?
How you doing, man?
Good to see you.
You too. Congratulations on buying a pub.
Well, do you know it's the kind of place that normally wouldn't let me in. You know, it's like those private members clubs. It's 300 years old.
Oh wow!
But one of my friends had he just bought it, and he wanted guys to come in with him, and me and three other guys were like, sounds quite fun. You know, I like a night out.
Yeah.
I can have and it's a lot of money to spend for a free night out. You know, so that I don't have to buy any booze.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is, all my pals are like, "Oh, if we come along, can we get a free drink as well?" So like, that's gonna end up costing me money, you know. So
yeah, now everybody's your friend.
What's with the Marty McFly thing you've got? Is it cold?
Oh yeah, it's cold here in Maine. It's a life preserver. I don't want to drown.
So you know what I love? I mean, my favorite thing about doing these is getting a look in somebody's studio, because everybody's different, isn't there? I mean, there's a kind of continuity. There's the books and the figures and, you know, some prints and things, but everybody's got their own personality in the background, which I do love. Somebody said to me, there's a book of comic book artists studios. Is this an apocryphal thing, or is it real?
Yeah, I don't know. It must have been 5 years ago that it came out. I'm not in it. But I remember seeing something like that. Yeah. I mean, what you're seeing behind me is all Millar money, basically. It's yours.
That was a nice payday. That was pretty good, wasn't it? You know?
Yeah, for all of us. Yeah, you changed 10 people's lives. So, thank you again.
Oh, that's all, you know. So, and the main tax people will be delighted as well, you know. So we all had to pay a lot of tax afterwards as well, you know. So
yeah, for sure.
We kept Scotland going for a few years after that, I think. You know?
Yeah, right. That's good. They must love you, man. Do they even charge creators tax in Scotland, or is it like Ireland where Bono doesn't pay taxes or something?
Ireland have a pretty sweet deal, as I'm sure you heard. I remember Steve Dillon telling me about it years ago, and I think Steve might have lived there for a little while. I'm not sure, but it became like Bono and Jack Nicholson and all these guys all bought houses in the south of Ireland. If you were a sculptor, an artist, a writer, a poet, you know, any number of an actor, you know, you could have their tax free. And I do think there was a couple of catches. I think at any moment they can decide you don't have that status. And that's kind of a bit nervous if you've got kids in school and everything, you know. So that was the one downside. That's why everybody didn't just move there, I think, you know. But it's a pretty cool, that's a good setup, isn't it? And it encourages a lot of kind of interesting people into your country. You know?
Yeah, and I debated it when I heard that. I'm like, man, how much do I really like America? Maybe I should move to Ireland and tap into my roots and save a load of money before my Millar money gets here. But yeah, it just never happened. I'm happy being here, even though, well, actually, you guys pay more in taxes than we do. Europe as a whole.
Do you know, it's a bit kind of much the same. I think the UK and the US, because I looked into moving to the US. We were going to move actually a couple of years ago. It's not a huge amount different. You know, by the time you take into account paying for your health insurance and all that kind of thing, you know, it's a couple of percent. You know, there's not as much in it as it seems. You know, they get you in sales taxes and all this kind of stuff. You know, they get you in other ways, don't they? They basically take half your money. You know, so.
Why move here when your pub is in Scotland? I think you sort of.
Oh no, I went London. I've went London with the club. You know, so
it's in London,
right in the heart of Soho. It used to be, you know, the most famously sleazy area in England. You know, like right in the heart of London, Soho, next to the theatre district. But also, like all sleaze, you know, it's next to all the really nice places too. You know, the private members clubs and all this kind of thing. So so I have to get the train if I'm going for a drink.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm ever there, and if you're around too, I'd love to see it.
Yeah. So like Sean Gordon Murphy in Ireland, you just fitted right in. I mean, that's like, you've got a classic Irish terrorist name, you know, so.
Yeah, I did a DNA test. It's basically Scottish, Irish, a little bit French. It's not it's a lot of people in New England. It's the same thing, you know.
But you've got that around the eyes, especially, you've got that kind of Irish, intense Irish look. You know, like Ryan Reynolds has got that, and Bradley Cooper's
Okay.
got it, and everything as well. You know, there's
Yeah.
that. There is a look.
Don't take my potatoes. Look, don't touch my beer.
I was actually just saying to Lucy, though, I mean, I can't remember. The last time I saw you, was it when we did the Chrononauts signing in the States? And I think around about 2015 or something, and there was literally a DeLorean parked across the street from where we were doing the signing.
Yeah, that was fun.
You know, I always remember about this. I remember telling some, and I know you're a massive petrol head, right? I mean, your eyes almost popped out of your head. It was like an omen, you know, when you saw that car. And
oh my God, yeah.
I've told pals since. They said, did you go over and say hello to the guy who had it? I said, Sean went up and said, do you mind if I get a ride in your car? And the guys were cool about it. And I remember the excuse was, we're a couple of comic book creators, as if that was like a license. And the guy was, oh, that's no problem, and handed the keys over. And we got
so that's Jetpack Comics, and he was an employee of Ralph's, and he just had a DeLorean. He always wanted it. Back then, you could get a DeLorean for 15 grand.
Right.
And I made a deal with him. I said, I'll draw you a sketch if you let me drive around the block. So we set it up ahead of time to do that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. I mean, the looks that you get when you're in that car, it's just, you see people, and it's amazing, you know?
Yeah. It's like
like driving out of the, oh, exactly. Yeah. It has to be like Batmobile, or like showing up on a hoverboard. It's sort of a vehicle right out of people's childhoods, you know?
Yes. It's funny because most people don't realize it's a real car. You know, that
right.
They made those things in Ireland in 1982 or whatever, and lost the fortune. You know, most people don't realize this, you know.
Yeah, I know. There's a few amazing documentaries about DeLorean now, and his drug scandal, and the tax shelter, and troubles, and all that stuff. It's a pretty amazing story.
Do you know, but I didn't realize. I thought that was just an amazing coincidence. I've told everyone this is a coincidence that the car was parked across the street. I had no idea that was one of Ralph's guys doing the car, because I thought that man was very trusting, just handing you the keys. But suddenly it all makes sense.
No, he was very trusting. Yeah, no, maybe it's a better story if he just showed up. Maybe I didn't mean to ruin it by telling you this. It was set up ahead of time.
Then the other time
he came all that way.
But we met in New York one time as well, didn't we? Like, there was me, you, Scott Snyder, and our wives as well, you know. And I think my middle daughter was there as a little baby. And Scott Snyder actually showed me the most amazing thing, which was the baby was crying, like my daughter, and he says, you know, you can pacify children with phones. And I was like, what? And this opened up a whole new world to me. And he handed a mobile phone over, and she's been basically on it ever since, you know. So
wow, so we can thank Scott for the addiction of our youth. Yeah. I think we saw twice. I met you in person. It was New Hampshire, and then it was New York. But mostly it's been over the phone or Skype or whatever.
And it's funny, you know, that relationship when you're doing a book together. I mean, Chrononauts we did together probably took about maybe 6 months for you to draw or something, but thereabouts, maybe 8 months or something.
Yeah.
And it's quite an intense relationship because you're emailing each other every day, aren't you? You know, you're kind of, everybody's got a thought, or a page comes in and it's really exciting and you can't wait to go back and talk about it and everything, you know? And you maybe come up with an idea, you're like, why don't we try this with this page, you know? And it's a bit like actors, you know, where they have that 12 weeks of totally intense relationships. And then you're on a different project and you're dealing with different people and everything, you know? But we'd actually a really good time doing that. You know, there was, you know, we must have sent each other like 10-page emails every day just talking about trends and stuff we were interested in, you know?
Yeah, no, we were talking, I was asking you a lot about business stuff, not just about the Netflix deal, but about Marvel and DC and where the industry's headed, and, you know, wisdom that Stan Lee gave you, making your own characters, stuff like that, and complaining about the industry or wondering why it's not run better or whatever it is. So, yeah, I mean, I never get to talk to someone who's really good at business and is so open. So when I get the chance to talk to you or to Porch, or our mutual friend with the podcast, I'm always just hitting you with a dozen questions so I can get better, you know?
But I think we've both got that same thing though, where we love to analyze stuff. I think we've got overly analytical brains, haven't we? And most people don't. Most people actually kind of don't care about that stuff, don't they? It's hard enough to get your work done. But we're always thinking, but what about in 4 years' time if this happens? And we both, and it was quite nice because we both were endlessly fascinated by all the different avenues comics could go down. You know?
Were your parents supportive of you being a writer, being a creative type?
No, well, sadly they passed away when I was quite young, you know, so they never really kind of saw it. They assumed I had imagined that I would do what everyone else does and, you know, get into a normal job. They liked the idea that I had a hobby in comics, but by when they were alive, I really was just reading comics. But I think they weren't crazy about the idea of me still reading them in my teens. You know, by the time I was about 13, I could see they were starting to think, hang on, this is probably around the time you should sort of stop.
Yeah.
And
We're hoping you're going to grow out of this and start masturbating, just like everybody else. Here's a Playboy.
Because your family, weirdly, you know, we never talked about this kind of stuff, but you know, your family comic guys or anything, or you know, were they interested in this?
No. My father was a headhunter in the 80s, so I came from a white collar family. So I've got good instruction about business and money and stuff like that, planning ahead. And they were supportive of art, especially if I took it seriously. But if I wasn't good at it, they would have told me you shouldn't do this for a living. So they were skeptical, but they were willing to go along with it. And I'm very lucky in that sense that they were so supportive. They helped me out with college a little bit. Yeah, I was going to ask you too, like, where does the sense of business come from? Is it something that your family had, or is it a fear of losing everything?
No, well, weirdly, it's kind of the opposite actually, because I had nothing. So weirdly, the necessity breeds invention. So the idea of sort of making cash and making a living at doing comics, it would be more than a hobby, was absolute necessity. Because I suddenly found myself a teenager with no backup, and I had to make money fast, you know? And the only thing I could think to do was something that I enjoyed anyway, and thought, can I make a career of this, you know? So kind of the opposite of maybe what you had, where you were taking a risk by maybe going into something like comics and your family were nervous about it. I was like, I have nothing to lose, you know? So I think weirdly, my business acumen comes from the fact that I never fear having nothing. You know, I'm one of those, like in a casino, I'd just put everything down, you know, so I've had nothing before, and it's okay. I can do that and then start again or whatever, you know. So I know it's kind of a strange advantage. It's a bit like fighting the Joker. Like it's impossible to anticipate what my plan is, because, you know, I don't care generally.
Right. Right. Yeah, as long as you don't bomb two fairies and make one blow up the other, I guess we're okay.
That's next year. Do
you have
sorry, on you go.
Oh, I was going to ask you if you brought up the Batmobile, if you had a favorite Batmobile.
Oh, without question, the 1966 Batmobile, you know,
66,
although I have obviously a soft spot for the 89 one, but then also the Bruce Timm 1992 Batmobile. I mean, for me, they're the glory years of Batmobiles, aren't they? I mean, they're the awesome ones.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm an 89 type of guy, but that was the right age for me. And but even as a car guy, I look at new designs. I would still go back, like, even if aliens landed, I feel like they would look at the 66 or the 89 and go, those are the best ones, you know?
You know, my brother, I remember going to the cinema to see Batman in 89. My brother, I was 19, my brother was, you know, he must have been 40, no, hang on, 30, 34, right? So he's a proper adult. And I remember that moment where you had the reveal of the Batmobile, you know, when the camera just pulls back and you see it for the first time halfway through the movie. And my brother almost jumped out of his seat and he went, "Oh, yeah, beauty." And everybody around it, you know, there's always a crazy guy in the cinema. Everybody laughed, you know, because we were just so into it, you know. But that was a very exciting time for Batman fans, so, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, man. So I like that one a lot. When I tried to watch the Batman Superman, I like the design of the Batmobile, but in the movie, you never had that shot where it's like, this is what it looks like. And then they get inside. It was always just like moving around, and I don't know what I'm looking at, and things are exploding, and I don't know what it's like to make movies. It's obviously very hard, but I prefer the 89 because it was clear, you know?
Yeah. And they had less money to spend as well, you know, so I think they had to plan it all really carefully. I mean, I think the trouble, I mean, this is where all the Snyder fans come after me, you know, but you know, when they've got so much money, they just throw everything at the screen and they scenes, it's just not as well constructed. You know, it's done by a massive team of people who are all throwing stuff into it, you know.
100%. Yeah, it's just insane that you spend $10 million on a shot, but $1 million on a script.
Yeah.
The script is the backbone. And I understand words are cheaper than special effects, but it's insane that they ever start making a movie without an ending. You know, like Gladiator is one of my favorites. I think they shot that without really knowing where it was going. And by luck, it worked out. And if Ridley Scott could have that hit every time, I'm sure he'd be thrilled. But yeah, it's crazy. I agree with you. I think low budget and making creative teams have to be smart and clever to get around problems. Gives you a better product. I think throwing too much money out of it isn't always a good thing.
Well, I think the sweet spot for superhero stuff's about 150 million, you know, like, so by the time you get, I mean, I know they say these things cost 250, but I know they're spending over 500 on some of them. 450, 500 is not unheard of right now for these big movies. Like the Avengers and Justice League cost over 500, and and you lose something, I think, once you get over that 150, 200. It suddenly becomes. I mean, what's beautiful about animation, I think, is the script is so beautifully, perfectly crafted, 3 years ahead of time, isn't it? Because they don't want to waste a frame. And it's the same thing with these movies. Once you get to that big bloat, it's kind of feeling the story is completely lost. The more expensive it is, the more you lose, I think.
Right. Yeah. It's funny when you told me that Super Crooks, the whole season cost as much as one episode of Jupiter's Legacy.
Yes.
One of those Super Crooks looked beautiful, and that's my favorite style of animation. And I don't know which house that was, but whoever they are, they're fantastic.
They're amazing. It's a Japanese outfit called Studio Bones, and everything they do is great. We were so lucky with them, and I didn't know them. That was chosen by our Japanese team, and
right.
That, I mean, the credit sequence was just awesome, wasn't it?
Oh, beautiful.
The end credits as well. Did you see the end credits?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah. What's the next project you have coming out?
I've got to ask you this stuff.
Sorry.
No, nobody's tuning in for me. They're tuning in for you. So. But I was going to say, it's funny because normally at these things you do an intro, but I feel this weird thing just now where I feel as if I don't want to tell anybody who you are, and if they are listening to this podcast, watching this on YouTube, they should know. They should know your work. And there's a part of me that sort of feels, for 22 years now, we've been sort of embracing that mainstream so much that the actual hardcore comic fan has been pushed to one side and kind of forgotten. Like when I was a kid, I was a hardcore comic fan, right? And I learned about it, and I learned about the history of comics, and I learned about the creators, and I could tell one inker from another inker on different artists and everything, And I feel as if we're losing that. So I want to do a thing for the purists, So like, if you don't know who Sean Gordon Murphy is, you should stop listening right now. It's like, this because we're going to go deep. We're going to go deep in all the stuff, and if you care what we think about stuff, stick around. But otherwise, don't. But I mean, you'd say you're probably one of the greatest Batman artists of all time. Unusual now, and also a great writer artist, which was a great tradition back in the 1980s. But you brought that back. So you've built the universe. Worked with some of the greatest writers of all time.
That's right, especially you.
But you get Grant Morrison, Scott Snyder, Rick Remender, and everything. But now doing your own thing, which is really cool and everything too. So but welcome. A little belated, but welcome to the podcast. Like, I've loved doing these. It's great catching up, and this will be a beaut, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's I think that I was lucky to have good writers in my corner that I could talk to. So I got great advice from you, from Scott, from Rick Remender. So I tried to sort of put together a Frankenstein of, I'll take this out of Mark's pocket, I'll take this out of Rick, I'll take this out of Scott, whatever I can take out of Grant. I don't know if there's anything there for me, but he's just so kooky, and it's just I can't do what he does. I'm more of a grounded type of guy. But yeah, I sort of was able to piece together what you guys do and try to make it my own. I think the one big difference is I think I can write like a B-level script, if I'm honest. I think I'm basically writing glorified wrestling matches with these characters. But if I can draw it into an A-level, with A-level art, I can fool people into thinking I'm a better writer than I am. And that's not false humility. Like, I literally feel that way. And yeah, I feel like I'm just sort of faking it and trying to get better each time, reading my dialogue out loud to make sure it doesn't sound trite or anything like that, And I think that, if everyone in comics was Hemingway, I wouldn't bother. But to do a decent job in comics, you have to, like a C-level book. I mean, how many C-level books are on the shelves? A lot of them. And I guess the question I ask myself is, can I at least do C-level?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be the next Mark Millar. I'm not trying to be the next Scott Snyder, but can I at least give myself a script that I can support with my art? So that was sort of the challenge at first, was not to psych myself out by thinking I need to try to be the best. I just wanted to be a little bit better than average. And then I would fool people with my art, hopefully.
Did you ever think, because there's two ways a writer artist can go. There's Frank Miller and those amazing 70s, 80s guys, like Starlin, Simonson, Chaikin especially, who's a god.
Right, yeah.
But then there's the other thing where I've known so many artists going back to the 60s who, the minute they start writing their own stuff, it doesn't
Mm.
quite work as well. Were you ever scared of that? Were you ever, because Jack Kirby
Mm.
is obviously one of the greatest of all time, the most amazing concepts, but New Gods
Yeah.
didn't quite land because his writing, his concepts were amazing, but the writing didn't have
Mhm.
the nuance that Stan brought to the stuff and
Right.
the humor that Stan brought to the stuff and everything.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'll be slaughtered for saying that, but it's true. It's why those things never became as big as his Fantastic
Right.
Four and all those kind
Yeah.
of things. Were you ever
Yeah.
nervous about that, or did you just think this will just come in time? It'll be okay. You know?
No, I read about 10 to 20 books about screenplays and about writing and plotting. Like I really tried to dive into the research. I think a lot of problems that artists have when they try to write is they think they've absorbed writing through osmosis.
Mhm.
But I think if creating a book is step 1 through 10,
Yeah.
an artist comes in at step 5. So
Mhm.
once this plot's done, the characters, he embellishes that. But I think to be a good writer, you have to come in at step 1 and understand why writing is a craft, how you have to have different drafts, why dialogue works, what a page turn is. You can actually study those things and learn about dialogue and what works and what doesn't. And like script, good script, bad script, or Story by Robert Mackey. When you learn that there's basically 10 different types of movie plots, it starts to come into focus. And I think that a lot of artists don't bother looking into that stuff because
Yeah.
I don't think they care, or they don't think they need it, or they're intimidated by it. Um, for whatever reason, I don't know. Like I was really fascinated by the science of plot.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just part of being an over analytical type of guy like you.
But I think it's interesting because creative energies, like writing or artwork, or whatever, is such a left brain activity,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and you're unusual in that you're a big petrol head, you love your cars and
Mm.
everything. You're quite a right-brained guy as well at the same time, so even your pages, I think, almost look like manuals. You know what I mean? They look like a design, a blueprint for a house or something. They're
Yeah,
beautifully constructed. It's like you feel as if it's not going to fall over. It's not
right.
flimsy about
Oh,
yourself.
yeah. Yeah.
So you must have that in you as well. You must. Is that from your dad then? Like, is that?
Probably. I think, well, I think you have it as well. To be a triple threat, it's like in acting, you can sing and dance, and
Yeah.
I can't remember the third. But to be a triple threat in comics, it would be writing and drawing and then business, maybe,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And very few people have all three of those things.
Yeah.
Very people have the business aspect, which is
Yeah.
why we historically creators have gotten it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know it's hard to, because you have, for example, you fly to LA, you have to go to a bunch of meetings. You're asking for $100 million, whatever it is you do.
Mhm.
And they expect a wacky creative director to walk through the door.
Yeah.
And if you can wear a suit or come across like one of them and speak their language, they start to relax, be like, oh man, this is a guy we can rely on. He's not some kooky, Tim
Yeah.
Burton type of guy who's trying to be all edgy. He
Yeah.
speaks our language. I feel like when you have to go to the suits and get money for something, it's a lot easier if you speak their language, which means don't indulge in your left brain thinking. Try to indulge in your right brain thinking,
But it's funny, I've never been a cookie guy, like growing up, I wasn't a cookie guy. I was a really straightforward guy, and I think I always thought, is this a disadvantage in this game because everybody has
Right.
their image, whatever. I've just always just been myself, and everybody would wear something a little unusual, have their hair an unusual way back, especially back in the 90s and everything. And I thought, do I need some kind of image or whatever? And then I realized whenever those guys do walk into a studio, everybody's like, okay, we're going to screw this guy, Whereas, whereas when I walk in, one of the Netflix execs says to me, you just look like a banker coming in, like I just had. So
more intimidating.
But they immediately relax though as well, because they know, okay, this is going to go fine. Like when studios were bidding to buy Mellow World, as when other studios were coming in, I loved the board meetings, because they were just guys I could have a laugh with and everything. But you're right. I mean, you've absolutely got that too, because that was what our great conversation used to be about, wasn't it? Because we looked at 85 years of comic books and saw people being ripped off, even right up to the modern day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And I feel bad for them, but I also wonder why they weren't more careful. The Bill Finger documentary on Hulu is amazing. And I feel really bad that happened to Bill, but I feel almost worse that it had to land on his granddaughter's shoulders for her to figure it out. I think it's a little irresponsible that he didn't push back more. I mean, there's a scene and he was sitting with Bob Kane in a park, and Batman 66 had come out. Bob Kane was a millionaire. Bill Finger was not. And at that moment, I'm just surprised he didn't go, "Hey, man, I created the Batmobile and the Batcave and all this stuff. Like, I feel like you got to take care of me, or I'm gonna have to get a lawyer." Like,
Yeah.
that was the moment where he should have pushed back, and he never did.
Yeah.
And he got Bill fingered by it, so to speak. And there's still 1,000 Bill Fingers out there who, the history has examples of why we should speak up for ourselves, and
Yeah.
most of us still are afraid to do it. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get all intense and serious.
No. I
Speaking
mean, this
back
is
to Batmobiles.
no, it endlessly fascinates me as well, because this goes way back. And do you know the story of Edgar Rice Burroughs? Did you ever hear what happened with Edgar Rice Burroughs?
No, I'd love to know.
Love this, right?
Mhm.
The reason we all got screwed, well, not we all got screwed, I mean, the industry as a whole, the comic book creatives started getting screwed, is because Edgar Rice Burroughs made so much money, right?
Mm,
And whenever he created Tarzan, almost 100 years ago,
Mhm.
he made enough money that he bought a town, right? So he had this
Wow.
phenomenal amount of cash because he had the newspaper syndicated strips, the movies were happening, radio plays and everything on top of the novels that he was writing. And he had so much cash, he bought his own town. And that town exists in California now. And he called it Tarzana. So there's a town.
Oh, wow.
And one of
That's
my
great.
friends who's quite a big
Yeah.
actor, he lived in Tarzana, and he'd no idea that the fire department and everything, all this stuff was all originally paid for with Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Right.
Like,
Tell me that when the fire department gets to the trucks, they don't have poles, they have vines. No?
and the
Oh.
beauty is not a comic book guy, but a pulp guy like us 100 years ago made a lot of money. But
Right.
then the guys who were used to making a lot of money, saw it all going to a creative type, and they were like, this is never happening again, so
Yeah.
the handcuffs came out for everybody. So the Siegel and Schusters and all these people, they never made the money they deserved to make, and it
Right.
probably didn't break again until the Turtles, till Peter Laird and
Mm.
Kevin Eastman, they
Right.
made, I think somewhere around, and this was 30 years ago, about $800 million or something from the Turtles.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then that made everybody a little nervous again as well, and they tried to strip
Yeah.
away the creator rights. So we have an
Right.
ongoing battle, don't we? Like,
Yeah.
there's periods where you make a lot of money and then they try and put the shackles on you again.
Right. Well, yeah, you have the moments of disruption.
Mhm.
Even in music, you have this when the studios are ahead, and then the creatives took control. In the image of the 90s, the creatives took control.
Yeah.
Marvel and DC lost ground, but then Marvel and DC took, what it is what it is. It goes back and forth. What's interesting about the Turtles guys is if you watch a documentary about them, they did not plan this.
Yeah.
It happened to two guys who were completely unprepared, had handshake deals. It could never happen that way again.
Yeah.
But it worked out for them.
Yes.
Somehow they had the right people around them to sign the right contracts, and they got paid and whatever. That's great. But someone like you is able to take that story and go, well, I'm going to show up prepared. I have a Ninja Turtles idea. I have 10 or 12 or 20 of these ideas. So it's interesting, like taking the play, like I want to know what Laird did right, and I want to avoid what he did wrong. And I'm just so glad that we have like the history of these things so we can learn from them, And I think you're in a good embodiment of how to do it, honestly.
I think also though it's of its time, because I see so many people trying this now, and it doesn't necessarily work at every period. You have to. It's a bit like skiing. You have to sort of move around. You've got to weave in and out of what's fashionable, what's not. And like create your own comics, for example, is not what people want all the time. Like there. I don't know if you ever noticed this, but I don't know if we talked about this, but I noticed years ago there's 20-year cycles. And the first 5 years of these cycles, people want new characters. So DC was 1938 to 1943 for all the new creations, Marvel in the Silver Age and so on. And then you had the Image guys and everything, 1988 to about 1993, Hellboy, Frank Miller stuff and everything. So if you try and do it at the wrong time, if you try and create a Miller world or something at the wrong time, it doesn't work. You have to. In the next period coming up, I think is 2028 to 33, so but I think when they generally consolidate what you're doing with things like Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men and everything in those times, and maybe do those projects as side projects in the meantime,
Right. Yeah.
I think the real solidity in your career, I think, for those other 15 years is to be, and people hate hearing this, but to do company-owned books,
Yeah. I agree with you. And you were the first person to tell me about that 20-year cycle. And you're absolutely right, because I remember thinking, you told me that, I thought 20 years ago, I think that means Spider-Man 299 is about to come back. And it did. And I'm glad, because I love Spidey 299. And you can almost count down to when we're going to see another. And it doesn't always work. Like they'll try to relaunch Dukes of Hazzard or Knight
Yeah.
Rider, and it doesn't always work. But it's interesting to see the cycle start to continue.
Somebody
See,
tries.
it makes yeah, it makes me feel bad because I loved He-Man and GI Joe,
Yeah.
but now that we have the '80s created so many IPs for kids, that now we're reliving each IP, and I feel like these kids deserve their own version of these. They don't need my Transformers and my GI Joe. It'd be nice if they had their own new things. And I think the only new thing they're getting is anime or manga.
Yeah.
Which
Which is why that's exploded, doesn't it?
is why that's yeah.
But
Dad likes Iron Man. Iron Man's lame. I like One Piece. You want your own thing that your mom and dad don't have.
Well, pop culture things almost never cross over into a second generation. Like if you think back, it's very rare. Like Sherlock Holmes has, Batman has, which is quite unusual. Superman has, really. Superman's kind of heyday in terms of mass popularity is probably 1955 to 1979 or 1980 or something. So you get roughly about a generation, but it just emerges, doesn't it? Like Marvel won't happen again. That's your dad's thing now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's Japanese influence stuff now. Like my kids are obsessed with mine. That's
right.
So the way I like Super Friends, they like mine.
Right. Yeah. I can see that.
And you're somewhere in the middle, because I'm always fascinated by your influences, because most people I can draw a line in their artwork and see where it all comes from. I can see a little bit of Bruce Timm in there and everything. You can see some of that early 90s kind of stuff. But you're 42, right? So you're 10 years younger than me. So you should be bang on the demographic of the image guys, and I see almost nothing of that in your artwork.
Yeah,
it's so interesting.
I can do it. I was a Jim Lee clone. I wanted to be Jim Lee when I was 17 or whatever.
Yeah.
But when I went to art school, I just was looking for new types of art, and I found a lot of European art, stuff that you can only buy in France. But I love what anime was doing. I love some of the crazy styles in South America. It was very brush heavy and very romantic.
Yeah.
And Japanese drew the best tech speed lines, so I wanted to do that. And Europeans did the best backgrounds, so I wanted to really pull the camera back and show the whole waterfall or show the big building.
Yeah.
I was just sort of picking and choosing. Like I just basically took the things that I like the most and turned it into my own style. But I'm trying to homage my favorite things, and also add in a bit of cartooning in there, Calvin and Hobbes. Every now and then I'll try to draw a character with just dots for eyes. Warren Parlov does that too. He's one of my favorites, and I know he's one of your artists as well.
He's a great friend of mine. I absolutely love Goran.
Yeah.
There's a photo of us trying to sneak out of a restaurant in Glasgow because we'd no money. And we both showed up without wallets, and thank God Frank Whiteley came in and paid the bill, but I adore him. But it's funny, I never thought of the Bill Watterson connection to your work, and now I can completely see it. The brush line is absolutely Watterson, isn't it?
Well, just trying to pay homage to my favorites, honestly. I think comics, the style of comics in America was mostly based on cross-hatching and feathering. There were these techniques that Western comics owned. And as great as that stuff is, as much as I love the Jim Lee and how it evolved, I was started to look for something different. And I saw Mike Mignola, and I thought, wow, why am I pulling so hard to this? He's not using crazy camera angles. He doesn't use 3-point perspective. He barely even draws cars. He hates drawing cars, and he'll tell you that. So I was like, what is going on in my head, my brain? Why am I not as excited by Jim Lee anymore? Why am I being pulled to this moodier stuff? And I think that's when the exploration had started. I still love drawing the splashy Jim Lee panels, but I really enjoy a quiet panel of a guy walking through a chapel, with a lot of black in the background too.
That's really interesting. It's funny because I'd never really considered before, but it's that analytical brain that you've got where it's like building a car or something. You've taken all the things you think are cool and you put and say, but I don't see a huge amount of American influence in you. Is there any traditional American comic book artists that you draw upon, or is it Brazilians and Italians and Japanese?
I think it's mostly them. It's funny now with Instagram, you're starting to see a lot. It's all blended together now. It's sort of a beautiful thing. You've got the YA style, which looks like Pixar. All the characters have slightly larger eyes, which harkens back to anime. And then you've got the coloring of Europe, so beautiful, lush coloring.
Yeah.
Like when you look at most American comics, it's an explosion of Skittles. It's like every color on the page, and when you're working with the Justice League, there's no
Yeah.
avoiding it, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas in Europeans, they'll try to use like 3 colors and try to like limit and narrow the palettes.
Yeah.
Even when I did, Chrononauts and books, anytime I do a book, I try to give the colorists like just focus on 3 colors, try to design the characters to be generally like the X-Men with the blue and the gold and the black, like just narrow down the palette so it isn't so overwhelming. And that's more of a European thing, I think, where that comes from.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember years ago, 20, even 25 years ago, the European artists were totally unpopular in the US. Like the US market couldn't abide it. And now every single great artist really is somebody coming from South America or Europe, isn't it?
Italy, yeah.
And it's in Spain as well, so Spain, Italy, and Brazil. Canada had a really good run there for a while as well. You Fiona Staples and Nevin and everyone, But like, and Stuart Eminem, who's a god, But South America, like Rafa Grampa, Rafa Albuquerque, and all that, there's some really brilliant Brazilian artists as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
You seem to be ahead of the pack. You seem to be into that stuff like 20 plus years ago. Yeah.
I'll tell you, because now I'm working with I'm doing my own spin-off books with White Knight, so I'm hiring artists, and the artists that I am generally drawn to tend to be Italian.
Yeah.
Because I was following Gigli to get him to try to do a book, and then I heard that you got him, which is great because he's in good hands. But the one thing I'm finding with the Italians is they're not fast. They're not on schedule. Matteo Scalera is the exception.
I was going to say Matteo Scalera is the fastest artist I've ever worked with.
Yeah, he is an American stuck in an Italian's body with an Italian's hand, because he's amazing. But outside of him, they're all very slow. They're sort of unreliable sometimes, and I worry about that because I really want that style to spread. But if those artists can't get their act together, I wonder if we're going to move on to some other country or culture or style or whatever.
Or do we just change the way we think about it? Instead of that monthly grind, the 12 books a year and everything.
Totally.
Like Matteo Buffagni. Are you familiar with Matteo Buffagni?
I probably know his stuff. Yeah.
I just did a series with him, and he's spectacular, right? But he's maybe 2 pages a week, so he's never going to be drawn Batman or whatever. But it's worth just carving a year out and just thinking, okay, go off and do this in this year. And I'm going to be so delighted with this book at the end of the year,
Right.
And I wonder if we start thinking about, that's the way I tend to think now. I've just done a thing with Travis Charest, and I said, right, it's only 24 pages, but it took 4 years, but I've got a whole Travis Charest, so maybe we just the way we work,
Yeah, I know. We got to get him out of his vineyard, put the wine away from him, and tell him to get back to work.
He's got a nice life, though. He's like, well, I could draw a page, or I could sit with this glass of wine looking at my vineyard.
Oh my God, yeah, he's gonna outlive all of us, honestly. I mean, being workhorses, like you and I, we have bragging rights, and we might have more in the bank, but he's gonna outlive both of us. So good for him.
I think he's pretty rich, actually. I think somebody said to me, I don't know if he's independently wealthy or something like that. I mean, that's the curse. That's the curse of being if you're an artist who's already got cash, your motivation is zero, isn't it?
Yeah. I think he married well, to his credit. I wish I married a doctor sometimes. Don't tell my wife. But it's funny. I mean, that's most of the artists I know have a spouse who has a real job, and that's the only way they're able to make a living, which is kind of sad.
I think the other thing is to have a spouse who is really business minded and real. Like Lucy, my wife, is. Yeah. She did the deal, really. I mean, people would come up to me and high five me and like, well done, the Netflix deal and everything, selling the company. But as you know, she was the one who negotiations with other studios for the year before, and then a year of negotiation with Netflix doing the sale itself, So she was doing all these late night calls while I was in bed. And I know your wife Katana is also a writer. I'd imagine you discuss plots with her. Does she edit you? Do you talk?
Oh
about
yeah. Like a lot of the Harley Quinn stuff. So I had 2 Harley Quinns in my book. I made a way so that the old Harley Quinn is still a doctor, still smart, more women's lib, and the new one is sort of the violent cheerleader type. But I wasn't trying to make a comment. I was just trying to keep both Harley Quinns. And anytime I had a scene, I would run it by my wife, be like, "There's a love scene with the Joker. She's talking to Batman. Like, I kind of want to play with the romance, but I don't want to go too far because I don't think people want a romance. How do I handle that?" So she was able to sort of go over the dialogue and tweak things and get rid of I have a tendency to over-explain things with my scripts, so she's able to like cut back, which, as you know, is an asset in comics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like without her help, I don't know if the female writing would be as good. Obviously.
Have you ever heard Frank Miller's thing about that? I remember reading, that brilliant Miller Eisner book where they're having that giant chat.
Yeah,
200 pages.
yeah.
I think it might have been in that where Miller
Mm.
says a cartoonist has to be like an assassin. You just come in and do the scene and get out as quickly as possible. So come in late and leave early, And
Yeah.
I mean, Miller could do in 2 panels a whole scene sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
It's
that
funny. Talk about in the 80s and 90s how it was very much a Western style. I think the only artists that broke from that who were big were Sienkiewicz, had a European influence. He did a lot of stuff based on Sergio Topi, who as an Italian guy passed away like 5 years ago. Dennis Cowan, I think, was also really into Topi.
Yeah.
And I think Neil Adams he was able to filter it through an American lens. So you didn't know you were looking at European influences because he was Neil Adams, so he had his own thing going completely. But I think that some of the artists did celebrate it for their European sensibilities.
Yeah.
But generally, you're right. If it didn't look like John Byrne or Fukushima, then they weren't interested. Especially back then, they had house styles, so they wanted it to look consistent.
Yeah. No, it's funny because then when I did discover the European guys, Luke Zafino and all those guys felt really familiar because I'd been looking at them through the lens of the likes of Sienkiewicz, or, Dennis Cowan and everybody for years.
Yeah,
and it felt kind of familiar but fresh at the same time. But who put you onto that though? Because you're so interesting. Because I don't know, I discovered this stuff 20 years ago, but I feel as if you must have discovered this stuff as a teenager then, like how did you discover this international art scene when comic stores really only had American comics for the most part? Outside of you had Mobius and you had Akira, but not much else.
Yeah, so it was anime like Akira and Ninja Scroll were big, and you had to buy big VHS tapes back then. I remember spending a lot of money to get anime. I'm not a big anime guy. I just knew this is something new. And then I discovered Travis Teray, honestly, and he had gone from filling in for Wildcats for Jim Lee. And he was very quickly, he got as good at Jim Lee, and then I don't want to say better, but made it his own. When Wildcats X-Men came out, I remember just my copy of that is just so tattered from looking through it, and I go, oh my God, this is amazing. It's more of an illustration, of course. And then when I heard that he moved to France, I don't know. I think I just started becoming more aware of what European guys were doing. So I read interviews with Miller and Mignola. They would talk about European artists, and then it was Jorge Zafino was a big one. He did some Punisher stuff back in the 80s and 90s, Conan. And I don't know. I just in college I had enough time. I stopped buying Western comics and I focused more on art books and more European stuff as it came my way. And no one really turned me onto it. I think I just found it on my own.
And were you picking up American comics at all? Were you reading Marvel, DC?
I would pick the Batman animated series comics. It was a one and done type stuff. It was just a cartoon in book form. I mean, the only reason I kept reading that was because I didn't have to keep up with the continuity. It was just you buy it, everything is there. And I wasn't really. I didn't have a comic shop near me, and I didn't have the budget to follow a bunch of books at once. So I just.
As a little kid then, in terms of X-Men, Spider-Man, did you have no knowledge of that stuff growing up then? Were you not picking up any of those books?
I learned mostly about that through the cartoons.
Right.
I'm embarrassed to say, but since then I've gone back. I've had my friends recommend the different runs to read because I want to be educated about where I'm coming from. But I would say that the thing I'm not comfortable with is I have done extremely well in comics for a guy that has read shockingly little of them, to the point where it's probably not helpful. It probably gives me an outsider's influence, so I can look at comics with fresh eyes. So maybe it's helpful. But if you go deep into X-Men, John Byrne, whatever, you're going to lose me. And I always feel like when I go to a convention and people start talking about the stuff they read, I feel a little embarrassed that I haven't kept up with all of it.
But that's fascinating because almost nobody who has a career in comics, has come from completely outside comics like that, because it's such an unusual art form, especially as an artist, because the storytelling is so specific to comics, isn't it? It's not like I've got friends who are classically trained painters, and they'll maybe say
Right.
to me, "Oh, I think I'll maybe try and do a comic," and it's all wrong. The storytelling, because they didn't grow up with all the influences, you know, and they know how to
Yeah.
they don't know how to lay out a page even in the most basic way, you know. So how
Yeah.
did you fucking navigate that? I mean, this is incredible. I've never heard anything like this.
I don't know. The Batman the Animated Series was helpful because it's
Mhm.
such good storytelling. Yeah,
Yeah,
it holds up to this day.
yeah,
Clarity, pacing, what a even though it's not a book, I
mhm,
think knowing how the pacing is supposed to work and what
yeah,
clarity is.
yeah.
And I, as much as I loved the image stuff,
Mhm.
storytelling on 90s image books is terrible.
Oh, it's horrible.
They would admit it. Like that's not what it was about.
Yeah,
But I wanted to learn. I had friends in college who were really into classic like Casablanca, Shawshank Redemption. Like, why does Pulp Fiction work?
mhm.
Why do some of the Transformers movies not work? And you can really break down the basics of storytelling. And I got really interested in that stuff. Um, and as much as I love the 90s image style, there wasn't really a single book that had great image art with
Yeah,
great storytelling. It was all about explosions and guns, which I
yeah,
loved. You
yes,
know?
yeah.
So yeah, I think that for me, maybe with you too, when I discover an aspect of my job that I'm not aware of, I just want to dive in.
Mm,
And I became aware that I didn't know much about storytelling. I didn't know about clarity. I knew about drawing like Rob Liefeld. I knew about guns and muscles and boobs, but
mhm.
as far as like what is Mike Mignola doing to make me feel this scene with Hellboy,
Yeah,
this atmosphere, it's just black. There's like nothing there. And then you ask him and he'll talk about Toth. So you go, okay, well, who's Toth? And you go back and you're sort of learning from the creme de la creme of these artists who have been inspiring artists for generations, you know?
that's
Um,
so you've reverse engineered comic book art, which is unheard of. I've been in this job, you know, most of my life, and I've never met anyone who's done this, which is really fascinating to me, you know, because
I
what
never
you've
thought of it
done,
that way. Yeah.
well, most people, if you think about it, look at everything and they distill the great stuff from the rubbish,
Mm.
and they learn from the great stuff, and hopefully don't make the mistakes of the rubbish. But what you've done
Yeah.
essentially is start with a list of the best and
Mm.
also not be distracted by the rubbish, you know, just really focus on,
Right.
okay, you can draw a line through Alex Toth to Mike Mignola, you know, and figure out what
Right.
works with that stuff. That's really
Right.
fascinating. I've never heard of anyone else coming to it late and then working their way backwards.
Yeah. And no one's ever pointed that out to me in the way you just did. I never really thought about it. I knew that I felt like a criminal because I was getting away. I mean, how do you get to have your own Batman universe without reading every Batman comic? And I haven't. I've read, 30 Batman comics my whole life. But I knew enough about the movies and the
Yeah,
cartoon and things that were going on. Like I knew what the hits were. I knew what the
yeah.
20 rules of Batman are, and I knew how to sort of keep that going. Um, but yeah, I never collected I have two long boxes of
Mhm.
comics that I have from my entire life. You can see one right there. I have two of those from my childhood comics, and that's all
Yeah.
I really read. And then when I went to school, I started picking up more art books and European stuff, and that's the shelves right back there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, like when I read a comic now, it's hard for me because I get annoyed if it's not clear, if the
Yes.
dialogue's bad. I can't push through. I just put it down.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of a snob that way. Like I don't like to spend money and look at study things that don't work. I'd
Yeah.
rather buy the books on the shelf that "Ooh, this is working. I do like this
Yeah.
stuff, you know?
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I pare down everything I have down to the
Yeah,
excellent things around me, you know, because I do think you're a product of the five people you hang around with, aren't you? Most, you know, and it's the same with
100%.
your bookshelves. So for me, there's
Yeah.
only 3 Indiana Jones films. There's only one Matrix film. These things
Mhm.
aren't on my shelves. I don't have the collector head.
Yeah.
I just like the good stuff around me.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Like I think a lot of artists have a bunch of influences they put on their shelves, but they'll have a pile of books right next to where they work. And I
Mhm.
have mine behind the computer here, but you can
Yeah.
see it's like Spider-Man 299, Rick Leonardi. There's maybe, 20 different artists in this pile, and I'm
Yeah.
constantly like that pile doesn't collect dust because I'm constantly picking it up, looking and putting it down.
Yeah.
Like I love 1,000 artists, but I can really only use 20 of them.
Yeah.
Uh, I just want to cut the fat and only embrace the ones that I can actually like. I love Chris Ware, this
Yeah.
independent creator who
Oh,
did
he's a genius. I love Chris.
Genius, right?
Yeah.
I love it. I have no use for that in my art, none. And I love that stuff to death, but get it away from me because I don't want it influencing me. But give me Sienkiewicz, give me Zaffino, give me these guys, and like no offense to Chris Ware, it's just I've
Yeah.
picked a thing and it goes this way, it doesn't go that way.
But Chris Ware,
Same with movies.
he seeps into your work sometimes. I think there's a 3-panel sequence with Chris Ware that always stays in my head, and it's from his Velvet Fist Cast and Iron book, and it's like it's that thing where he's it's so grim. It's just a guy looking in a window, a sort of nondescript man looking in a window at a bad sweater, and he imagines himself wearing the sweater, and he's happier wearing this crappy sweater, And there's just such a bleakness to it that this is like this guy's dream to have the sweater. But you find that ends up in a Batman story in some way, because you can't help things just influence everything you read influences you in some way.
It has to. Yeah. It has to. It's funny when you draw a page, you're sort of transported to that page the entire day. So if I'm drawing, ancient Rome in a Millar book, I'm basically in ancient Rome that entire day. I'm listening to a documentary about it. I have my Google images showing me pictures of chariots. So Chris Ware he spends an entire day in a sweater, basically, sad, looking at the rain. Like, it's amazing how well rendered it is. And you really feel that moment, but like, oh my God, how that guy hasn't slit his wrist by now is beyond me.
But do you know what? The guys who do the really bleak stuff turn out actually to be really sweet guys, don't they? And it's actually the guys who do the kind of family friendly stuff who always turn out to be a bit weird.
Oh my God, yeah. Balthazar, it's got to be a big weirdo then. Scotty Young, it's got to be really weird. Yeah, that's funny. Do you know who does comics end well for? What I mean is, how many creators get to retire happy, get to have their ending in a good way, who don't become passé?
Yeah,
got enough money and savings to have some kind of healthy life balance.
Yeah,
I feel like you can count those people on like 2 hands. In some ways.
Yeah, probably one hand in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's
like who gets out of this?
It's like politics. It's like political careers, isn't it? Like political careers always end in some kind of failure. So even if you've made all the money in the world, generally the work you do at a certain point is less good than the work you were doing 10 years ago or whatever. I mean, this is inevitable, as you're on your 500th story or whatever, So like, but I mean, but I think what you've got to do is you've got to just look at it and think, am I enjoying what I'm doing? And, am I getting the best out of my day? And is there still an audience for it? So like, and you might have a second wind, like Stan Lee, for example, Stan hadn't really written a run on anything since 1972 or something, but he was still the most famous comic book guy of all time. And I would say the most successful career in terms of, what he built and what he laid down. Modern Hollywood was everything that Stan, Jack and Steve Ditko,
Yeah, that's true. Do you ever hear that most creative types produce their best work in their 20s and 30s? Does that ever make you nervous as we get older?
I think your 30s to your 40s is usually a good run. I think your 20s you do a lot of rubbish.
Right.
Like, I think artists are a little different. I think they peak faster. Because your style is new and everybody starts aping it, and then your style can become passé because everybody's doing your style. Like Jim Lee, cross hatching on the foreheads. Everybody, I mean, Jim did it and nobody really had done anything like that, and then suddenly everybody's doing it, But I think that you get cannibalized, don't you, as an artist? Then a writer, it's a little bit difficult to do, and it's also a little bit difficult, to kind of prove you're good. It takes you a while to break in as a writer, whereas you can spot someone's artistic talent right away. So I think writers probably 30s, artists 20s. I think you're probably right. In comic certainly,
Right. I guess with musicians, I think a lot of musicians produce their best work in their 20s when they're really raw and they're not afraid of breaking the rules. But I worry, what if my 30s is my best decade? How do I keep my edge as I go through my 40s and 50s? How do I reinvent myself? How do I stay honest?
I think you keep working, the big mistake people make is, I know this is hard because we're analyzers, but is to overly analyze. You just got to think, what excites me right now? Like what would I want to read? So like Magic Order, for example, is maybe my favorite thing I've ever done. I love doing it, and it was one of my more recent things. I prefer it to some things that at Marvel or whatever, that sold millions of copies overall. Like Civil War. Civil War is Marvel's biggest selling graphic novel ever, but I feel Magic Order is a better book. It's a really perfectly constructed book that I wouldn't change a panel on, So you just have to keep going. And then the next one you do might suck. And the one before it might suck, whatever, but you just you have to just look at the broad picture. You know?
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
Do you worry about that?
Do
Or
you?
is that something you think about? You know?
Yeah, I think about how to stay. So I've been doing well with Batman for 6 years now.
Yeah.
Most of my income actually sells is from the original art sales.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Publishing is maybe 20% of my income, but
Yeah.
relying on art sales is risky, and it's a prospector market, and it could go away at any moment. So trying to diversify in real estate and boring stuff like that. But I do think about what the next move is for the industry. I think I even heard an interview where you were talking about this too.
Yeah.
Things change every 20 years, and
Mhm.
we're at the end of a 20-year window,
Yeah.
and we're probably in second year out of 4 years of this transition.
Mhm.
What is comics going to look like? Are Marvel and DC going to hold all the power? What is Viz going to do? What is Amazon going to do? What about digital?
Yeah.
Marvel movies, are those still going to be a thing? Are we going to
Yeah.
move on to video games? I don't know. I know that there's a lot of things in the industry that are dated, and a lot of people who are controlling things
Mhm.
don't want things to change, but they
Yeah.
have to change. So I'm wondering what the new what's new on the horizon for the industry, and how are we going to survive?
I think
I'm
things,
hopeful about it.
but I think there's 20-year cycles, there's 40-year cycles and everything. So I think, for
Mhm.
example, the mid 1930s to the 70s, late 70s, you had the newsstand market, and then
Right.
for the next 40 years, you've got the direct sales market,
Right.
I think the direct sales market is such a brilliant market. It works so well because people come back every week. I would in
Mhm.
stores like 5 days a week. I couldn't even wait till Wednesday. I'd be coming in
Yeah.
in case they showed up early or something. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
such a great, reliable market. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of things have to happen, isn't there? There's got to, the publishers have to be bringing out stuff that excites people enough to come in. The magazines have to be at a certain price point, so that people can afford them and so on. So
Mhm.
I think in the 90s, one of the problems was the quality. They oversaturated the market. There was just too much stuff. And the chances are, if you picked up a random comic, it was terrible, around about 1995, 1996. But then they pared the industry down, and the industry was in good shape again. It was like tending a garden. By the year 2000, 2001, you had rebirth again. There was growth suddenly,
Right.
And I think that's the inevitable thing. I mean, I'd love to see DC and Marvel paired right back. I mean, they have the same number of titles that they have out in boom times and a lean time. And I know everybody says this is a boom time. It's not, for the Western comic book publishing market. Talk to anybody who works in publishing, and it's a lean time.
Yeah.
So you've got.
Yeah.
I don't know why people pretend it's not. You walk into a comic book store and you see the American comic book section. There's a quarter of what it used to be. But like, but you can learn from manga. I don't see manga as a threat. I see it as an inspiration. So you just got to think, okay, what works about this, and what can we do to modify things? But I would love to see the numbers taken right down. Why are there so many Batman books? Why are there so many Superman books? Take it back down to what the market actually wants. Put the best possible creative teams you can have on it. It's not rocket science, and I think you rebuild from there. But I do think the big two is an excellent foundation to start building on, because not like we've talked about a lot. Not everybody wants creator owns. I think creator owned does well when Marvel and DC are doing well. I'd love to see some real solidity back into Marvel. What do you think? I mean,
I agree. I agree with all that.
Is that why you're doing Batman? I mean, do you see that as a great rock to build your career on?
Yeah. The two reasons to do Batman. One is the original art sales. Two is if you can make it. I mean, the biggest universes in comics is Batman and the X-Men.
Yeah.
And to have my own Batman universe, to basically be able to do what I want, is pretty rare. Like, I don't think anyone's ever had that in the way I'm doing it. And to have spin-offs where I'm sort of the director of certain books. So I'm very happy for that, and I'd like to keep that going, because I know maybe I'm not going to have a good year next year, the year after that, but I know in 20 years I'll be Spider-Man 299. I'll be like, oh, Sean's back. Fuck yeah, let's get another Batman or whatever. Like, you can just, party starts again. The people, the kids who are reading my stuff now will hopefully be working in the industry, and then they can hire me, and I'll be 60 and barely able to hold a pencil, but hopefully they'll bring me back. Like, I'm relying on those readers and those fans to give me a second wind. And the best way to make your mark is to, on a title like Batman or X-Men. So that's the second reason why I'm doing it. I also enjoy it. I have a lot to say about Batman, and I like the work. I like the character. Yeah, I mean, it's not a slog at all. Trying new things with Batman too.
you talk about it being a disadvantage, not knowing much about the continuity and everything, but I think it's a huge advantage because the general public don't know comic book continuity as well, so they can pick up your books like this. They can pick up that White Knight universe, and it all makes sense to them. You at worst, you maybe have to have read a couple of dozen comic books, but literally thousands you have to go through.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've done the same. The Old Man Logan, Superman Red Sun, the Ultimate line, and everything. They're all self-contained things, and I find it really hard. I mean, it must be impossible for you, if you haven't read these books, to try and navigate the DC universe or something. That would probably be a nightmare for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I'll ask for help. Like I'll say, I don't know anything about Green Lantern. Can you hook me up with someone that knows a lot about Green Lantern and tell me what I need to do with Green Lantern?
Yeah.
Tell me what I don't need to do. Tell me what can be reinvented. And then I'll tell him my idea. Then he can come back and go like, that'll work. That won't work. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So if I can win him over, he's like my perfect customer. If I can win over that guy who loves Green Lantern with my weird spin on Green Lantern, then I feel like I'm in good hands. And I think it's good to have that beta tester, whatever idea you're taking. If you don't know, like I know enough about Batman to do it, but if I did Green Lantern, I'd be lost. So I need that guy. And I think it's nice to have someone in your corner who can feed you the information that you might be missing. You find that you have that with your stuff?
Well, again, because I do my own things, really, it's
right.
But I tend to just be drawn to stuff that I liked already anyway, so like to be thrown into the middle of a Marvel book that I'd never read. Friends of mine have done this, and they go and they read 5 years worth of back issues. And that just seems like hell to me, I'd rather just do something fresh, But it's funny with you though. I love it when I find one of your pieces of art where you're drawing a character I've never seen you draw before. Like I saw a Spider-Man piece by you recently, and he's just like crawling around a corner under a fire escape.
Oh yeah.
And it's a beautiful piece. And it's, sometimes an artist will do something that you haven't seen before, and it's really exciting. I remember Alex Ross back in the 90s would show you stuff you've never seen before, or Travis Charest, or Frank Whiteley. And it gives you a whole fresh take on something that's 6 decades old. And I sometimes feel it's good to jump between the companies. I didn't really do much of this, but it's quite exciting when somebody you really associate with DC like you, and you go all the way back to Punk Rock Jesus, Vertigo books and everything. Even 20 years at DC, to suddenly see you doing something like X-Men or Wolverine, and I was talking to Greg Capullo about this in the last podcast. It's kind of exciting, like artistically it's exciting, and also from a news point of view, like nobody looks at comic book news sites hardly anymore because everybody just stays in the same place. And I think from a business point of view, you can command higher page rates and better deals, when you jump companies, and then they have to pay you more to get you back, but also creatively it recharges you too. Do you never feel that urge to do something at Marvel, like a run on something else?
I'm working on that. I have plans.
Well, I mean, financially, it's so much better sometimes to do your own thing, because you own the rights forever, like something that's as long as one of these books, for example, as a movie franchise, you could be making money off the rest of your life, you're getting millions of dollars for. But sometimes you just love something too, don't you? And from a business point of view, you can make good dough, but there's nothing I want to do more than a big Superman book just because I love it. And you must feel the same way with things too.
Yeah, and to reinvent yourself too. Like that's what got me down this black hole. Is I love Batman, but it would be nice to do something different and something that's just as interesting, and to reinvent myself. Because if you do the same thing over and over, it gets kind of stale. And I agree. Todd's probably made more on Spawn and action figures, but some would argue that Spawn has gotten stale here and there over the years. But if Todd had stopped and done Spider-Man book, he would have spiked interest again and gone back over to Spawn. You can play with the dials that way.
But I feel the same way. I mean, like I think whenever there's a news story of a guy who's currently writing Avengers is the new X-Men writer, or somebody who was doing Green Lantern is suddenly doing Batman or whatever, it's kind of expected, isn't it? I think the news stories have got to be a shock. Like, you probably don't remember this, but whenever John Byrne left Marvel to come and reinvent Superman in 1986, like, people were standing in the street outside comic shops talking about it, and you've got to have that big shocking news story every now and then. The comics themselves have got to be exciting, but I think the news behind the comics has also got to be exciting. Like, when Joe Quesada came into Marvel, I mean, that was like the most exciting thing ever in 2000. It was like one of us was suddenly running one of these companies, a comic book creator was suddenly in charge, and the energy that brought to the company was phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. I'm wondering, like, what the next big news push, what the next big exciting news event will be. It'd have to be you signing with DC or Marvel or whatever, that would be a big one. Are you actually buying DC or taking over in some exclusive way?
That'd be quite
Um,
good.
yeah.
But it's funny though, because I do think on a smaller level, what is really exciting though is like, Greg Capullo is the first one to do it, is there's been this stalemate between Marvel and DC for 20 years, for the blood to start moving again and the guys to jump back and forward between the companies. Like Scott Snyder has been at DC for over 10 years or whatever, but Scott Snyder, and if he took over, I don't know, Shazam or something, you'd be like, all right, okay. But if he takes over X-Men with Greg Capullo, I'm like, okay, what's this gonna be like? So, and like the Marvel guys have been sitting there for 20 years doing the same books, to get them over to DC. It would just get the blood moving in the body again, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know why it doesn't happen more. I know that my rate at DC is so high that Marvel won't pay that rate.
Right.
I think that they view me or people like me as a threat because I could be their next Todd McFarlane and screw them over somehow. They like getting people on the cheap. They'll pay more for writers, of course, and I understand why. Although I guess Greg Capullo would be an exception to get him back.
Oh yeah, I think Greg Capullo. I mean, these guys are well paid, but I think it's also a bit of a club, isn't it? I think that comics, I don't know if it's always been like this, but it's pretty tribal. And if you're either in the Marvel gang or you're in the DC gang and you don't socialize much, and nobody talks about page rates. I mean, I tell people my page rates because I want to make sure my friends aren't getting ripped off. But I mean, are you quite open with other pros about your rates like that?
I am. I have one of the highest, so I don't mind telling people. But I tell people because I want them to know that you can ask for more. You have to try to level up every now and then and ask for a raise. The idea of not talking about, they love that we don't talk about page rates. It only helps them, of course, Well, but I think there's a lot of artists just used to being poor and they just adopted this religion of poverty where you're not allowed to talk about page rates. You can't be capitalist. You have to be about the purity of the art. And meanwhile, they don't have lawyers. They're not reading contracts. They're just getting set up to be the next Bill Finger. It's just in their DNA.
What you should do is have your own Tarzana. There should be Murphyana. We should have Murphyana out there. But
my own town.
The people who do well out of this is the publishers. Then because they always say, we never discuss rates and everything. But I'll give you a fast example. One of my friends, who's one of the biggest artists in the industry, he told me about 15 years ago when I was at Marvel. He was one of Marvel's top 3 artists, and he was getting paid $350 a page or something, right? And
I think I know who you're talking about.
And I was like, are you kidding me? And I said, ask for a pay rise. He said, I'm too embarrassed. And I said, I'm going to write you a letter and you copy and paste it and you send it from you. And he went, I'll get fired. No way. I said, you're literally one of their best artists. They're not going to fire you. So he sends it, and overnight he went up to $1,000 a page, and but he'd never asked, and it amazes me the number of people that do that.
Yeah, one friend of mine who works for Marvel was their top artist, and when I heard what he made, I was like, dude, you not making a lot hurts everyone below you. Because if they're getting away with paying you shite, then they're paying everyone else shite, and they're justifying it. Like, it's irresponsible for you to not ask for more money because you're hurting the rest of us. And I didn't write him a letter, but I basically told him what to say. Tell them that you have another offer. You have to play the companies against each other, like that whole thing. But that doesn't come naturally to a lot of artists who are left-brained.
You've got to be a hustler. I mean, if you're a freelancer, you're a self-employed person. You've got to hustle, But are you aware of your position right now? I don't think I've told you this, but again, when I look at all these trends, right? Have you noticed that there's 5 years where there's an alpha in the pack and everybody copies them, and you're kind of that just now? You've been this for the last 5 years, and I've always been fascinated by this, right? So like, you're looking early 90s, those 5 years, it was Jim Lee, everybody's copying Jim Lee. Second half of the 90s, it would be Alex Ross. Everybody's doing their sort of painterly upshots, Alex Ross style, Then Hitch, brilliant.
I was going to say Hitch.
For the next 5 years, everybody's trying to be Brian Hitch. It's usually when the guy explodes on the scene. Jim comes in 1990, Brian comes in 2000. 2005, they're all copying Travis Charest. And when I say copy, I mean influenced by, So like, but there's a pack leader who, makes a style very popular, so Travis Charest, everybody's doing Travis. Then 2010, I'd say it's probably Fiona. Like everybody's trying to do sort of saga style stuff, And then Europe, since about 2015, there's so many people influenced by your style. Are you aware of it? Do you see it, or are you too close to it?
Yeah. It's funny. People are complaining about AI art right now.
Yeah.
And when hearing the arguments is interesting because it's too soon to be able to tell. I don't really have an opinion on it. But one of the arguments is, oh, people are gonna swipe my stuff and I'm not gonna get anything. And I'm like, people have been swiping my shit since 2015. I haven't gotten a thing either. Like it's just something that happens sometimes, you know. Yeah, I don't know how to catch that lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
You know, what might have hurt my chances is I'm not on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm not as woke as people would like me to be. I am a liberal, but I'm like classic liberal. I have conservative friends. Like I try to get along with everybody. But the people who seem to be really energized online don't like me for those reasons. They think I'm too much of a bro. Look at this white guy with his privilege and his car and his money. And I feel like if I had spent more time going to shows and brown nosing people and trying to get people to like me more, maybe I would have done better. But I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say.
In what sense? I mean, do you want more Twitter likes? You know, or
I don't know. I want more money.
You know, or do you want a career, you know, that you're proud of?
Yeah. I think that's the truth. You and I always knew that. I don't think you and I were ever distracted by the social media trends and the outrage. And it's funny now. I mean, people get into comics, they get hot, and they're gone a year later. Like the arcs that people have in comics, it's insane how quickly they go. Like if you have someone in comics that you don't like, just wait. In 2 years, they'll be gone because they'll shot themselves in the foot, or they can't actually write a good book. And eventually the publishers are going to recognize that. So people with longevity, they are just able to produce and keep their heads down, honestly.
Well, is it Brad Pitt doesn't have a Twitter account? George Clooney doesn't have a Twitter account. You know, like movie stars don't have Twitter accounts, you know, but they're doing just fine, you know. And what people mistake sometimes is likes for popularity or likes for quality, you know. And it's easy to go up and say, I'd love starving should be a thing of the past. Anybody who likes starvation is an evil person, you know, and then they get 500 likes or whatever, you know. It's like, that's not a career. That's not a career. Go and do it. Go and do your work, you know.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right, man. I mean, I think that publishers are starting to realize, so a lot of the hires are people who are from Instagram, who can draw a pretty pinup with some pretty colors on it, but they don't actually know how to do a 6-panel grid, tell a story, draw a background, move the camera. And editors hire Instagram artists because these Instagram artists have 300,000 followers. So you think that you're going to see a spike in sales, but it doesn't transfer at all. In fact, a lot of these people are not able to do storytelling inside of a comic book. Like they've seen a Marvel movie, but they don't actually know the medium very well. And eventually it just doesn't work out. And like, I almost prefer to work with like a Walt Simonson or Klaus Janson, someone who's old school, who knows how to do the job. You know, like I'd rather have, you know, a B- Simonson page than an Instagram kid who's not going to be able to tell a story. And in 20 years, when that book is collected on the shelf, I think Simonson's going to stand the test of time.
I think we're going to look back at this period that we've just come out of. I don't think we're in it anymore, but I think we're going to look back at that sort of 2016 to 2021 period in particular as the most shameful in comics history, you know, in terms of the, you know, the way creators were treated, the way they moved, you know, like lunatics moved in packs to take people down and everything, you know, like, I mean, it really will be looked back on. Plays will be written, like The Crucible was written about the McCarthy era, you know. So, like, you know, I think, and there's going to be an Arthur Miller emerges from this who comes out very well, but there's going to be a lot of people who are going to look bad, you know. And I do remember a lot of the people who were going for older creators and things, you know, like guys who'd been in the industry for years and were really good guys and had maybe accidentally said something the wrong way or made a joke 10 years ago that somebody didn't like. And the glee these packs of hyenas had, you know, that ripped these guys apart. And it's funny because I think a lot of them thought they would get jobs in the industry from tearing down the guys who were in the industry, not realizing that the people they were hoping to work for realized they were lunatics and horrible people that you would never in a million years want to work with, you know?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm sure you and I are thinking of the same 10 names.
Yeah, there's 10
hyenas here.
Yeah.
And in the end, like they're a lot of them are powerless. They've washed out. they're famous for accusing someone of inappropriate behavior, which there's no evidence. Like, yeah, do inappropriate things happen in comics? Of course. And should bad behavior be confronted? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they're making lists online, secret chat rooms of like, here are the 20 people we would like to take down. So everybody keep your eyes open. Make sure Mark Millar, like if you ever see him in a compromising position, or he and Sean Murphy are hanging out and there's a girl in their lap, get a photo because we really want those guys. Like that's how they think. And I've seen these lists, like people are, it's like if you have success, you have crosshairs on your back.
Yeah.
And it's not because they think they want your job. It's because it would just be fun to ruin your career.
Yeah.
And they get a bunch of likes for it. And then the next day they would move on to somebody else.
And the bloodlust there, and what I mean, it's in every industry, it's not just comics, but like, I think actually there's an old expression that hurt people, so people who are damaged, go out and try and make people kill themselves, and try and destroy other people, and that was happening. And it was weird because the industry was slightly cowed by it. The way that animals, when they see, if a bunch of zebras see another animal ripping apart a zebra, they stand back. People were sort of standing back, and I do think it was quite a shameful period for all of us. I think the fact that we were silent sometimes whenever people who were actually okay guys, who maybe just did a tweet that you didn't like or something like that, that they were destroyed, and ultimately the plan was to make people homeless, to make people lose their career and everything, wrapped up in the guise of virtue. It was these tweets all still exist, like these packs that we're hunting, and they're going to look bad in a very short time, I think.
Yeah. I would love to see a documentary about what happened in comics after Trump and talk about the 5 most annoying people out there who wish they had jobs, who beg for Bleeding Cool gig, who kiss Rich Johnson's ass, hoping that it's going to give them for those people. And it's so pathetic, but I know it would make good television. Yeah, maybe that'll be the next Millar World project. It's a documentary series about these hyenas.
It was always wrapped in virtue, which was the weirdest thing, wasn't it? And it was like the worst people. But what I always thought was interesting is they all eventually sort of got found out in their own way. Because if somebody's crazy, it doesn't take long before you find out. If somebody's a nasty piece of work or whatever, And the sort of good guys tend to kind of get a bit of longevity, So I mean, I think comics generally it's quite nice guys, isn't it? Like I generally like everybody I've worked with. For the most part, everybody's actually quite cool. Kind of people.
Too, Yeah, that's easy to forget too. I mean, I agree, and I feel like 90% of the people you meet, you get along with. I mean, you're in a pub, you're just not going to shout at somebody, even if you don't like all their tweets. You're probably not going to say anything because that's how the world always has worked. But if you go online, you start getting this impression that everyone's at each other's throats, and you forget that most people in comics are normal, regular dudes just looking to get paid and get money for their family and kids, and they don't love Twitter. They don't want to dunk on people. They just hopefully will draw Spider-Man one day, and that's their dream. But if you go online, it looks like chaos. But I think that's just a crazy 5%.
Even if that, I mean, I was in the comic store yesterday, and some guys recognized me and we're standing talking, and it's lovely, like, I mean, who doesn't like mixing with guys who are into all the same things? It's nice.
So that's the thing I learned from you is when we were in New Hampshire, there was this pub across the street, and there were all these people there, and I was kind of a name, but you were Mark Millar. So you walk in, and my nature is to be like, all right, I'm going to go sit in the corner and get a drink, and I'm going to get comfortable, and then I'll start talking to my readers. And you just dove in, and you were surrounded by like 20 nerds and laughing, and you love the same stuff they love. You were asking them what they thought of your books. You asked them, like, what do you think I could have done better? You had absolutely like a very curious, very thick skin too. And they loved that you were approachable like that. I've never seen a creator dive in literally to his readers like that, the way you are. Like, I feel like a lot of people are nervous about their readers, or they think their readers are trolls, but you see the best in your readers, and you have good energy. So I think you inspire good energy to come back at you too.
But that's our people as well, isn't it? Like if I walk into a comic store and there's 100 shops in that street, the comic store is going to be more like my people than any other shop there in that street, So I've been into this stuff as far back as my memory can go, to like 4 or 5 years old, So there's everything to talk about, and even you'll probably like the same movies, the same music, all this kind of stuff. So I do love our world. I do hate that Twitter distorted it, because I do think this world is a nice one, isn't it?
I think so too. Yeah. And I think we're all, even when the Twitter stuff started, I remember really getting on board and thinking, oh my God, so and so got harassed by an artist, and that artist needs to be pointed out. And I thought this is virtuous. Like I was all aboard, feminism. If people are being harassed in comics, like if there's racism, like I absolutely want to be part of the solution. And then like 4 years ago, I started to sense like, some of you people are pushing too far. Like you're overreaching, and then it got ugly. And then they went after me, and I was like, you know what, you guys go fuck yourselves. I don't want to play this game anymore.
It will come for you eventually, like because I just remember you being on Twitter and then you not being on Twitter. I don't remember any dramas or anything, but did you just decide, okay, it's going? Like one day.
There was a set of three waves happened. A trans writer who I thought I was friends with just decided to attack me one day, and she said I was part of the problem, and I don't know. You probably know who I'm talking about. And I had spoken to her on the week before, and I actually said, oh, she needed money for marriage. She needed a honeymoon, and she needed a medical operation. And I offered to like lend her money because you're just a nice guy. And even with all that, she still flipped on me a week later just to say that I was problematic, and I was love bombing her. This is this new word that she came up with. And everyone, even people who don't like me, were like, great, we finally got Sean Murphy. And they're like, wait, what is this? And they read all of her accusations, and it's like, it sounds like Sean's just a nice guy and you were hoping he would get you work. And because he didn't get you work, you turned on him. So that was one thing that happened. And then when George Floyd happened, everyone was saying like all cops are racist. We should get rid of all cops. We should defund the police. And I should have said nothing, but I felt the need to be like, I think good cops are good and bad cops are bad. I don't want to live in a society where someone's breaking in and there's no police, and so they were mad at me because of that. And then there was one other thing that happened. I remember talking to my wife. She said, it's time, we were getting a new car. And there are two options in the car were like a normal engine and a really big engine. And I'm like, let's get the really fast car. And she goes, we don't need another fast car. And I said, what if I quit Twitter and I get the faster car? She goes, okay. So the deal was, if I got off of Twitter completely, which is protecting my career, so we now have a car. Whenever I drive that car really fast, I'm like, oh man, it was worth it all day long. And when she goes, slow down, you're driving too fast. I go, if you make me slow down, I'm going to open up a Twitter account. I think that the problem is like with my sense of humor, it just doesn't work on social media, and people just want to take me out of context. So I've learned like I'm fine in person. Everyone likes me in person. Online, people like to take me out of context, and it just doesn't work. And I have a lot to lose now. So if someone does come after me and fabricates evidence for XYZ, I don't want to be distracted by that or have to take a financial hit, or my editors have to work with me if they're uncomfortable. If they think that I'm a secret racist or whatever, that makes their job harder. So the less I say online, just the more I'm protected.
Also, why even talk about politics at all? Like I think we're in the funny bit business. It's like I saw I came off Twitter about a year and a half ago or something, and I gave it to the Netflix PR team. I just said, like, you guys handle
perfect.
And but the reason I came off actually is I saw two of my kids were playing. You know what Roblox is? Roblox.
Yeah.
My kids were playing Roblox, and I was telling them off. I was like, guys, you've been on that for like 2 hours. Come on, we're going to go and play at something. And then I was like, I was tweeting, I think, as I was saying it, and I was like, I'm on Roblox. I'm on the adult Roblox here. This is ridiculous. And I came off it that day. But I have trickled on a bit recently, just because it is kind of fun as well. But what I generally do is just say, look at this amazing 1963 piece of artwork, or something I'm genuinely into, and I literally never, ever, ever get into a discussion about sociology or something, or politics. It's preposterous. And also, do we really care, what a guy who writes Superman or whatever, a guy like us really think about, Japan's fiscal policy right now? Who cares?
I think what happened was when Trump got elected, a lot of the left in the US freaked out and they felt powerless. And by bringing that fight into comics, comic professionals are very responsive to you. You can get your favorite writer or artist to write back to you, and they made comics the battlefield because no one else would pay attention to them. So they took their Trump anger or their Hillary anger, and they found a way to play that game within comics. And these are people that don't actually buy books. And I think the creators fell for it. I think we actually think we're doing good by being proactive or whatever. But I agree with you. I don't think it really matters one way or the other.
I don't
it's
think
gotten out of control.
I don't even think marketing on Twitter sells your books at all. Really,
I agree. Yeah,
I've seen some stuff. One of my friends who's head of marketing somewhere, he said they did an analysis and they said comic book fans, less than 5 of them have got active Twitter accounts. 5% of them have got active Twitter accounts, which is incredible. And you realize you're just talking into empty space. Really, most of the time when you think you're doing promotion, and they've realized there's more value in putting a poster up in a village than there is in having a digital marketing campaign.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like my favorite actor is Robert De Niro. I don't follow him on Twitter. I don't seek down every interview. And when a new movie comes out and I see his name, I get excited. And hopefully, like with me, with you, people don't necessarily follow you on social media, but they show up on Wednesday, they see a new Millar comic, they're excited and they buy it. And that is their only interaction with you and me. Like, I'm okay with that. I don't want them to follow my online bullshit.
Well, Tom Cruise, I knew nothing about Tom Cruise. He's been in my life for 40 years. And I knew nothing about him, so, which I kind of like, because then I don't come to his work with any, any hate or love or whatever. I just enjoy the work for where it is, which is the way we should all,
100%. Yeah, it's easy to lose track of that. I think too, a lot of the creative people are paid so little that they don't get value out of money. They get value out of likes. So they're misunderstanding their value is in getting likes or getting interactions on Twitter. That's the closest thing they have to money. And I don't think that they've made that transfer in their heads. But if you said to them, would you rather have $20,000 or 20,000 likes? Hopefully they would take the money. But because they don't have the money, all they have to hang on to is popularity, which turns it into a game of high school or something.
But also it's the search for credibility as well, isn't it? Because we're the sort of guys who aren't credible. We like something that we also liked when we were 5, like we crave to be taken seriously a little bit, So whenever somebody asks us about politics, we think, that's really interesting. Nobody's ever asked us this kind of thing before, And it's the same with my actor friends. I talk with them about this too, because my actor friends will go and get involved in political campaigns they know nothing about, because there's nothing a politician loves more than the glamour of an actor coming in, and there's nothing an actor or a musician loves more than the credibility of politics, But you've got to just ignore it. It's all nonsense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I remember there was this Paul Newman hated talking about acting, and when he went on a red carpet for a premiere, the reporters would ask him to come over, and he never would. And then one reporter said, asked him about racing. So he was a race car driver. It's like, hey, Paul, tell me about your new Datsun. So he was like, whoa, he came right over, chatted him up. And they learned, the way to get Paul to talk is to bait him with a question about cars and then get into the acting stuff. And that was the only way to get him to respond, because he was just so tired of talking about acting. And maybe we're a little bit like that too, like asking you a bunch of questions about, your books and stuff. I'm sure you've got all the great answers. But if I ask you about your pub, you're like, oh, I'm happy to tell you, like you dial it up to 11.
No, it's a great point. I think we're at the end of all that too, aren't we? I feel sanity is restoring again. I can just feel I feel it all ended actually last year. I think everybody's a little more at ease with themselves this year, aren't they?
Agree. Yeah, I think 2023, the super woke people and the super whatever the other side is, the crazy 5% on both sides, I feel like they're losing power. I think editors or publishers are waking up. I think they're realizing that Twitter outrage is not comic book sales. And hopefully we're seeing a restoration to sanity. And like the mid 90s, when there was a Marvel bankruptcy, we put out a lot of the fat and we shrunk. Hopefully that'll happen. And if you're not a good writer or you're not a good artist, it's time to get out, honestly. Comics needs to buckle down and turn the quality up and get back to a consistent schedule and hire workers.
Yes.
Not social media activists.
I mean, that's recession, unfortunately, has benefits. And it's like Warren Buffett talks about this: when the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming naked, and I think we're coming into this period now, But I say, I'd love to see a contraction at Marvel and DC to just high quality, because I'm reading pretty much nothing. The chances are when I pick up a Marvel and DC book, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not that interested for the first time in my life. You know?
Yeah. Do you think if you were running Marvel,
Yeah.
would you go to Disney and say, comics has been struggling. We need $100 million. I need you to invest in Marvel Comics. I need better offices. I need more qualified people. I need to increase salaries. We need better, like people who are working here are slaves and they're not happy. Like we need you to invest in us. And then when we start putting out better books, it'll benefit Marvel Studios and it'll benefit Disney. Do you think that Disney would see the value in investing in Marvel Comics? Or do you think that they don't care because they have all the IP they need?
I think Disney are probably making the mistake of thinking they don't need the comic as a resource anymore. I think they think they have, 7,000 characters, and that's plenty, and we can get screenwriters to do this stuff. But as we see, as they move away from the classic Marvel stories and start doing stuff that's screenwriter originated, it's poor. It doesn't work. You can see the stuff starting to fall apart now.
Right.
Especially in the television side of Marvel. So I think the actual work itself is so important. The paper, the comics, is so integral to making that jump onto the screen, because there's a reason this stuff has never worked before when they try and originate these things with screenwriters. There's a weird magic that comic people have got, that start this stuff. If I was them, what I would do is, I think it's hard to get 100 million out of somebody generally, so I would actually just try and restructure the company itself. So I would pare it down at half the size, and I would, half the number of titles that's coming out, strip it down to 2 X-Men titles, 2 Spider-Man titles, that kind of thing. And I would, whatever money was available, I'd use to get big page rates to get people back, because there's a lot of really good people, the Brian K. Vaughns and everybody, the excellent writers. I would try and get them back in, and I'd restructure the royalties, because as you know, Marvel and DC, you don't get anything for the first 50,000 sales. Almost nothing sells 50,000 copies at Marvel and DC. So it almost doesn't matter. What I would do is, instead of the tiny percentage they get over 50,000, I'd make it 30% or something. I'd make it crazy, so that you could potentially, if you sell 300, 400,000, you could make a huge amount of cash. So I would just restructure what's there, because right now it's quite intangible. They're making nothing anyway. So I would give away more back end and lure them.
That's fair. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you don't need all that money up front. I think just restructuring, you could do that job without needing all that cash flow. That's interesting.
And nothing on advertising, because I think good projects are the advertising in themselves. Like there was nothing to Dark Knight and Watchmen, nothing. It was just people were excited about the project. So you bring great creators and the audience will show up, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to see that too. I mean, I remember visiting the Marvel offices, and there was no room for the secretary. She had her desk where you got out of the elevator, that little room, that's where her desk was. Yeah. There was 2 chairs to sit. You had Axel Alonso, who was a group editor at the time, sharing like a 10 by 10 office with 2 other people, cubicles everywhere. I mean, it just seemed like I would not want to work here. This is a bummer. DC had a better office when they were in Manhattan. I appreciated what Warner had done to invest in DC, but I can't imagine we're getting the best out of the employees if those are the working conditions. And that's not to even get into the fact that a lot of editors at Marvel are making 30 grand a year living in Manhattan, which is poverty, which is insane,
What about you? What would you do, like DC or Marvel? How would you restructure things?
I think your idea is actually pretty good. I think cutting out.
Copy mine. You can't just copy mine.
Yeah. So I was. I would find a way to increase salaries and improve working conditions. Yeah. Cut the titles in half. My editor now has 15 different titles she works on. What? She can't be everywhere at once. Yeah, it's insane. She can't do her best work, and I think it's fair to her and to all the editors at DC. Back half the titles, invest more in non-Batman characters. Yeah. And even if the sales do this at first, you have to invest. Like, make a 5-year plan where you're going to start to see like a Lobo book or a Blue Beetle, and these characters that aren't Batman related. Yeah. Stop doing the variant covers scheme. That's just a game that is not returning as much as we think. And everything else you said. I hate to steal your plan, but I'm on board with that.
What with digital? I mean, I always look at everything internationally, and I'm so fascinated by, in Japan right now, they've had a slight slowdown in print sales. I mean, obviously they're still doing gangbusters, right? They're doing fantastic, but the print has slightly dipped from phenomenal to just amazing, right? You know, so I mean,
Right,
just a little, but the actual digital sales have gone insanely amazing. But over
Right.
here, you know, digital's been around since 2010, 2011 in quite a wide mainstream way, but we've never really gone over 10% of publishing. You know, so if a book does 100,000, it probably does 10,000 in digital sales. And it's always kind of been about that. Like, how do we break that? How do we copy that Japanese success?
Yeah, good question. I think the cost of a digital book, if it's $4.99 for a digital copy of Spider-Man, it's just too expensive. And I know that we have Marvel Unlimited, people have subscriptions to this stuff. I'm not quite sure how all that works, but I agree, there isn't really a digital strategy.
Yeah.
I know Viz might be pushing into Western comics. I heard that they were going to start trying to, they could offer Marvel, Viz can publish your books. How about if we did this? How about if we did that? Wasn't there a manga of Deadpool 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was really
sold like
popular.
crazy.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah, it did better than Deadpool did here in the past 20
massive,
years, something like that. Yeah. I mean, there isn't, I mean, even though Viz is already out, they're the biggest publisher of comics on the planet, I believe.
Yeah.
If they got a hold of X-Men or Batman, they already have the presence in stores and shops to sell that directly to their, I mean, there's nothing stopping them, honestly. Maybe that's a good thing. But I don't know if they have a digital strategy with all of that.
But there's something about paper as well, isn't there? I mean, people compare comics to music a lot, and I think it's slightly different because if you have a pirated file, you know, it sounds the same as something you paid for. But comics, a digital pirated file is different from holding something in your hand. And I don't know if you feel this because you didn't quite grow up with comics in the same way, but there is a collectible thing that's quite nice to have a run of books and everything. I like having things on my shelves. We're lucky that we have that built in.
Right.
Space, don't we? Yeah.
Do you think that Gen Z will think that way? Do you think they'll care about paper? Yeah.
No, but you still, I mean, my kids buy Minecraft and Pokemon cards and everything, so it's still in there somewhere, but not to the same degree as Gen Xers. You know, like we love having shelves filled with stuff. Love it. Yeah.
My nieces are Gen Z, and they use their tablet for homework, for school, for everything.
Yeah.
And if you say, "Do you want to read a comic on your tablet?" They're like, "I don't want to look at a tablet anymore." If you give them a book, they love that they're not holding a tablet. Like they're so exhausted by holding technology all day. A stack of paper stapled together is like a relief for them. I don't know if that's the answer, but I think about how they're going to interpret the smell of paper when they're our age, or even where our new customer base is right now.
Do you know what the Marvel Essentials are in the DC showcase books? Did you ever see those things?
Are those like the 5-minute Spider-Man? Is that what that was?
They came out maybe 15, 20 years ago, and they were like telephone directories. They were 500 pages for 10
Oh,
minutes.
yeah.
So they looked like big Japanese bound editions. They looked like Akira, you know. So you'd 500 pages of Stan and Jack or whatever, you know. And it was so cheap. It was like 10, 15 bucks tops, but you'd the equivalent of 30 comic books in there. My kids go through them, and they had no idea they were Silver Age. They had no idea they were old. They just thought they were like awesome, big, thick comics they could read in bed.
Good. And they're probably printed on really cheap telephone book paper.
Crap paper,
yeah.
Black and white.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't care about color.
Yeah. You know, that's really interesting that if we're competing with manga right now, why are we bothering coloring our comics anymore?
I know.
And I know the answer is, I mean, most readers won't, they need, Western readers need to see color. I get that. But it's interesting. I would almost argue for a Tankobon format. Like I've been telling DC, fake Batman White Knight, get rid of the color, shrink it down to Tankobon, put it in Amazon for $10. Like, why are we not putting? I mean, hello, write some kanji on it to make it look like it was published in Japan. Whatever, print it backwards so you read it from the back. And a 13-year-old isn't going to know.
Yes.
And they don't get it. They just don't. They don't want to take the chance, or they don't see it as an investment.
Your stuff looks awesome in black and white as well. I've got a gallery in the hall in the other house, and it's all original artwork. And your page
nice stuff.
Jumps out from the other ones, you know, because you use black so well, you know. And in Chrononauts, your use of black is so cool. I love it.
Man.
That's great.
Hey, you think? I was thinking about Chrononauts recently. Do you think with the success of Top Gun and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? So that's what Chrononauts is to me, is the theme of those two books together. Do you think that will move Netflix to want to move forward on that, or
Oh, we're in development with things all the time. It's funny because
yeah,
what people don't understand sometimes is that the scripts are just not there yet. So like
right,
like I've knocked back 3 Chrononauts scripts.
yeah,
Been 3 scripts, 3 different screenplays for it, and none of them have worked.
right,
They're just not there. And
yeah, yeah,
until I mean it's the same in every project. I've knocked back 2 Empress strips. I've knocked
right,
back 1 Space Bandits. It's like I'm like the biggest pain in the ass there because like I don't like it if something doesn't work out well. So like
right,
I want to be
yeah,
like the first thing we didn't work out very well at Netflix. It was a very
mhm,
troubled production. And I just want to make sure the scripts for everything are amazing before
right,
anybody moves on to the next stage. And we're getting
right,
there. Like the Magic Order scripts are fantastic. They're great.
mhm,
Hulk scripts are amazing. Prodigy scripts brilliant. But I'd rather wait another year, another 2 years until it's right.
mhm,
And the
right,
Chrononauts just haven't been there. So
yeah, no,
Netflix
fair
has
enough,
got an
man.
endless appetite to make stuff. But
Yeah.
weirdly, it's me. I'm the guy always saying, "Oh no, this has to be better."
No, I'm glad you're there, man. I mean, it should be groomed very carefully if they're going to spend that much money on it. You don't want to have something not work out.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
if you do 2 or 3 bad ones in a row, then nobody gives you money to do the 4th one. So you got to make sure it's good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what before we wrap up. I'm trying to think what other things we haven't covered. Like yeah, you writing yourself. I mean, I've got some notes here. Like you writing yourself. Like, was your experiences good with working with other people? Like were you happy or were you frustrated? Because I know that sometimes it's frustration that people are like, oh, I've got my own story. I don't need this one. Like, did you find it hard writing someone's scripts where you always wanted to do your own?
Yeah. I've gotten scripts from writers that I did not love for
Yeah.
endings that I thought were like, "Oh, God, that's terrible."
Mhm.
Um, or Scott's a friend. I told him, I love working with you, but the amount of stuff you give me, it's just overwhelming. I feel
Mhm.
like he drew pages where it's like he wrote me a page like 1,000 mermaids pop out from behind a rock, and I'm like, great, I'm drawing 1,000 fucking mermaids today. And he's like, what do you mean you don't like drawing mermaids? I'm like, no, I do, but like pull your punches, man. Give me a couple easy pages and then give me 1,000 mermaids. Um, and I felt like some of the scripts I got, I was like, I can do it. I'm collecting double royalties because now I'm getting the writer's rate as well as
Yeah.
the art rate. And I
Yeah.
know I can write to my strength. So I know I can do car scenes and
That's
Batmobile
interesting.
chases.
Yeah, that's
And I
interesting.
know I can sell, so and it's interesting when you write and draw stuff, like I'll have the script out while I'm working and I'll notice the dialogue's not lining up. So I'll
Yeah.
change it. And then I can change the art right there
Yeah.
and noodle around minutia and play with the dials. And
Mm.
you can only really do that when you're an artist and a writer.
That's
When you disconnect, like when you got art from me, you'd see, okay, Sean got 90% of the things right, but 2 things he kind of missed. So I'll move this here or there. And, there's only so much time you want to spend
yeah.
grooming a book like that. But when you're doing it all in your head at once, you kind of do tricks that Scott Snyder can't do, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
But he knows a lot more about plot than I do. He is, can't do what he does it the same way. But I do have a few mutant abilities that he doesn't have when it comes to writing and drawing because I know the artist, I know my strengths, I know I don't need this dialogue. I can just make it silent because I know how to make the art work.
Yeah.
Whereas Scott would say, "Ooh, Sean's not going to be able to. An artist can't handle this. I need to write a bunch of dialogue and voiceover here."
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's a book I'd love to write one day, but there'd only be like 10 people that'd be interested in reading that 'cause it's such a specific thing. Um,
But
but yeah,
Will Eisner, I was in Spain with Will Eisner one time for a week, which was amazing. We went for breakfast every morning, dinner every
wow, yeah,
evening. So I gleaned all this info from him.
yeah,
And he said that he thinks it was a division of labor when they broke the writer-artist thing. He said it was a
mhm,
good way of making people not feel too much ownership for something they created, so the publishers could screw you if
mhm.
they split it. So you're not coloring your stuff, you're not lettering. Because back in the old
Right,
days, somebody did it all. Usually a guy
yeah,
handed in a piece of paper with finished work.
right,
So
yeah,
it
you're
kind of
right,
it's taking it back to what it was 100 years ago, isn't it? To actually be the guy
yeah,
doing everything in the background. Like Frank Whiteley, he's coloring his stuff now. He doesn't want anybody coloring it. He likes doing his own, and he wants to
right,
insert his own stuff as well.
yeah. I admire a lot of YA artists write, draw, and color their own stuff. It's amazing. I mean,
Yeah,
they're doing more than I am.
yeah,
I mean, it's but normally as impressive as those artists are, they're generally not writing anything like high stakes or mainstream.
Mhm.
Because I think where they're like, I'd love to see an artist who can write, draw, and color in a mainstream type of way. And like Fiona colors her own stuff.
Yeah.
She was writing as well. I think there'd be no stopping her.
She is amazing though, isn't she? Like we say,
Yeah.
every 5 years someone new breaks on the scene who leads the pack. When she
Yeah.
came on, everybody was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
And you go on
Yeah,
to
there's
art and Instagram and you can just see so many people influenced
yeah.
by her,
Still, yeah. I mean, I think
Yeah.
when she came out, it sort of created Image 2.0. Like Image got hot again
Yeah.
after Saga.
Yeah.
Because Walking Dead had been there for a while, but it was the exception.
Yeah.
And like Saga came, even I think it also proved that digital artists were here.
Yes.
And they have their own style and their own way of coloring, and they don't worry about backgrounds drawing as much because they know they can color backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I think Fiona was proof of concept for a lot of people.
It was a nice.
She's Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it was a nice alignment of the stars when Brian and she got together, because Brian emailed me when I think he was just putting the things together, and he was like, as he was with a lot of friends, he was just saying who's out there he thinks really good. And I made some suggestions that would have been terrible, because I didn't understand his project. I didn't know what it was about at the time, It was very early stages. But he found the perfect artist. He couldn't have a traditional American comic book artist draw that book. It had to be something that brought a unique flavor, didn't it?
Yeah. No, Fiona's a friend of mine, and I remember traveling France with her. Yeah. When I got to know her well enough, I finally was like, Fiona, what are you doing with all your money? The amount of royalties, I mean, it's been a top graphic novel #1 for every month in a row or something like that. Like, you've got to be making, I don't even know. But like, do you have a house? Are you building a house? Or are you investing? Like, I'm just curious when you get to be that level, because at the time, I didn't know any artists who had been making that much and doing that well. And I wondered, like, how do you protect it? How do you plan for it? What do you do? And Brian was there too in France, and he was telling me how he had a financial advisor, and he had to buy a car once, and he didn't know how to buy a car. So his financial advisor said, I'm going to buy you a car. I'm going to send it to your house. Guy's going to get out, just sign the paperwork. And I'm like, how do I get wealthy enough where I don't have to buy my own stuff? And I just have a guy show up to me. Here's your car, sign here. See you later. Like, that's fuck you money right there.
The weird thing when you get rich is
meeting them both at that time.
Oh, sorry, what's that?
It's what? Say again.
I was just saying, like, when you get rich, people give you free stuff, which is even weirder. You don't have to buy books anymore. There's almost somebody sending you books. You get invited on holidays and things like that. There's always somebody with a yacht, who's getting you can have my yacht for a week, and everything, So it's really weird that going from a poor guy to a rich guy, I see the scam, like it's so awful, but once people get rich, they never pay for anything ever again, so it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a seductive lifestyle. Like, I can see why a lot of actors lose touch. Because, like the fact that Tom Cruise is so hardworking and grounded in a lot of ways. Like, I'm sure he's still crazy in other ways, but for a guy that everyone knows who he is, he's world famous wherever he goes. He can't get a moment to himself. I mean, it's insane that any actor is able to come across grounded at all in an interview. Like, you get to this lifestyle where people are just giving you shit. You go to a party, you get a gift bag that's worth $30,000. I mean, it must go to your brain.
Yeah.
I don't know. Not everybody can handle it necessarily.
Yeah. And he's done it for like 38 years or whatever. It's crazy, and still, maintained it. But what about you? I mean, that's a good last question, actually. Like, whenever we sold the company, everybody got amazing payouts and everything, just for Netflix. I mean, a lot of people don't understand this. They think we've got a first look deal or something, It's like Netflix own Millar World the way that Disney own Marvel, so we don't own this stuff anymore. It's all owned by Netflix. And then separately, I now work within Netflix, heading up that department. But like, what was the maddest thing you did? Because you're very sensible, right? Like, you're sensible on one hand, but you do love your cars, right? You do. Your eye is caught by a nice car. What was the maddest thing you bought with your money after the sale?
Well, I built the studio. I have a carriage house on my land that we rebuilt the carriage house to a studio, so I could write all of it off, which is nice. And then I bought a Datsun, and then I spent $100,000 making it into a race car. And it's a dumb midlife crisis toy. No one needs it. My wife thinks that I'm going to kill myself in that thing, but it's funny. So I remember waiting to get paid. And it's frustrating because you can't control it. You know,
Yeah.
you're at the studio, and we had gone through waves. Like, oh, it's at NBC. Oh, it's here. Oh, it's there.
Yeah.
And then someone got pushed out, and then the actors, one had a baby, and you cannot control that
Yeah.
thing, which
Yeah.
made me realize I don't think I'm cut out to be a Hollywood person.
Yeah.
But finally, one day, I get up in the morning and I check my phone, I check my bank account, and I see a number like, and I'm just like, I wake my wife up and I say, "Get up, we're gonna go out and buy something stupid." So we went out. I bought her a convertible BMW car for her just as a thank you because she's been putting up with me for a while.
Yeah.
And you know, we sold it like a year later. We lost a lot of money on it, but I don't regret it. But the rest of it we invested and into real estate and stuff like that. But I'll never forget that morning where I remember like refreshing my bank account every night before bed and every morning, and that shit can eat you up. And finally one day the number was just like, and I was like, "Ah, time to go buy something stupid." And it was a couple cars. What else? What did you do, Mark, when you got that check?
It's funny. Like there was a couple of things that might surprise you because I was curious. It's like, you always ask yourself, do I work so hard because I like getting paid, or do I work so hard because I like doing what I do? And what I realized is I love getting paid, obviously, right? But I also really like what I do. So I took a week off, right? And it was, a huge amount of cash. But I took a week off, and Lucy and I went to Mallorca, I think it was, right? And we stayed at this amazing place in Mallorca for a week. And then I came back and I started work the following Monday. I literally took a week off. And 2 or 3 of the guys retired. They were like, "We've made so much money, we never need to do anything again." But I realized I will never stop, because it suddenly went beyond about cash for me. It was just, I love doing it, and I love comics, I love films and everything, But I did buy some stupid stuff as well.
You bought a cow?
I bought a farm. Yeah.
A farm. Oh, the whole everything around the cow. I thought your wife bought you a cow for your birthday or something.
She did. She because we had the farm, so like I got 4 dairy cows, so like but I mean I don't know, loads of stupid stuff, but I had a lot of fun with it though as well, but then there comes a point where you think, okay, I have to be sensible at the same time too,
But buying a bar, buying a 300-year-old social club, that's a good one. Maybe that's my next goal.
Well,
just a place where I can walk into, get a beer, and they're not going to charge me, and I get on my own spot, my own seat. No one's ever in my stool.
Yeah,
that's the dream right there.
But the thing is, for me, it was just from an investment point of view. My theory is always invest in people as opposed to ideas, right? So like my friend who was buying it has got a great track record in business. Everything he's ever done has made money. So it felt, there's always a risk when you put money into something, but it's relatively low risk if it's somebody who knows what they're doing. It's like, sticking your money on a Todd McFarlane comic or something, it's going to sell a certain number, So this guy, he knows hospitality really well too, and he'll probably flip it a few years down the line and we'll make a nice profit and everything. But it's actually nice in London, being able to just wander in, have dinner somewhere. Like whenever there's Netflix guys over from LA, I can say, come to the club and we can sit and have dinner together and everything. It's nice.
That's the move right there. That's right. That's because you're not a left brain, you're a right brain guy, and they like that you're a business guy like them with your own social club in London.
Well, it also makes you seem like a gangster as well, doesn't it? It's got a kind of slight gangster vibe, which I like.
You're very gangster, man. I'll give you that. Well, I don't know any gangsters that have cows, though.
That's how I dispose of the bodies, So.
That's with them.
But listen, it's been brilliant talking to you, Sean. I mean, I think the last time we spoke, like I said, was about 6 years ago. But this will probably lead to a flurry of emails, because all the stuff we probably couldn't see on camera, we can.
It's funny. We didn't really hold back too much. You and I are pretty honest.
You can never go wrong by telling the truth.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I like to be honest with people, and even like spoiling some ideas, like what might happen with X-Men, Batman in the future.
Yeah,
people will hear those, but I don't think people will know what to do with that information necessarily. So I don't worry about that stuff so much.
And plus, it's kind of exciting. I remember hearing rumors of Frank Miller doing Batman 2 years before he did, and then the anticipation builds, isn't it? We need more radicals back. Everybody's got to stop being so scared and worried about things leaking and all that. Just like enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, I can plug one thing if you don't mind.
Please do.
So I'll be done with Batman soon, and I got the rights to do Zorro.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to be crowdfunding. Contacted the Zorro people, and I said, I love Zorro as a character. I can imagine what you're making with these small companies. I can make you a lot more than that if you just let me kickstart it. So they gave me a contract, and my next book will be Zorro. It'll be 4 issues, but contained as a trade, and we'll be using crowdfunding in the summer. So that'll be the next Sean Murphy project.
Fantastic. Do you know, that's one thing I want to ask you. I think, dude, I was worried this was going to cut off after 2 hours, but I know you did your crowdfunding project Plot Holes, which I love the concept for. It's such a brilliant concept, you know, that idea of all the guys helping each other finish each other's stories. Like, how did you find that? Because it's an area that really fascinates me, and I know it's quite contentious. I mean, Twitter is obviously insane, so you can't really kind of listen to what people are saying. I know there's the good crowdfunding organization that I don't know, one's Indiegogo and one's Kickstarter. Like,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Essentially meaningless. But was it a positive experience? Was it a good thing? You know, like the idea of working.
So the way, what I realized was when I do a book at Image, Image is I make good money with Image. I like Image a lot, but then they take it to Europe and they take a cut of that, and then there's the trade that comes after, and Image takes a cut of that, and I get it because Image needs to make money. But what I thought was, well, I know the guys in Europe, and I can make my own book. Like, why don't I just do that plan backwards? So I'll start with the trade. I'll kickstart it, and then I'll sell it to Europe for I don't know, 50 grand. And then round 3, then I'll take it to Image or to Whatnot or to another publishers out there that can distribute it in the direct market. So it's just a way to do my own book, but be able to retain more of the sales and control it a bit better. So I love it, and I'm going to do it again. I have a team set up. I have a printer that I like. I get more efficient every time with this sort of thing. And with Zorro, I told them the plan, and they're able to help me market too, because Zorro, they know a lot of Hollywood people. Tarantino wants to do Zorro one day. Well, he may or may not. Who knows? So with their connections out in LA, I'm hoping that this next Kickstarter will go even higher.
Fantastic.
It's a model that they were interested in, and like not every licensor is okay with that. A lot of them will want money up front, which I get, but these guys are willing to negotiate with that. So it's really happy to work it out.
You know, Kickstarter and Indiegogo have been around for ages, but I feel as if it's kind of like, you know, when there's an evolutionary jump in a species, you know, you have a whole bunch of things trying, and then something succeeds and jumps through, and we don't quite know what it is yet, whether it's digital crowdfunding, a reinvention in the comic stores, or whatever. But something is changing, isn't it? You can really feel like the tide has gone out, and there's a big wave about to crash, and it's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before. And I love this. Everybody's trying new things, which is really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, me too. I've been talking to a few different publishers outside of Image. Again, I like Image, but I'm willing to try new things now because I want there to be a disruptor. Even if Plot Holes doesn't do as well with this company as it would have with Image, I just want to try something new because I'm just tired of people not taking chances.
Exactly. Well, so where can people see you then? Is Instagram the best place to kind of see what you're up to? Do you have
Instagram.
Those days?
So I have my art dealer runs a Twitter account, so you can find me on Twitter, but it's not me. It's just announcements, book releases, signings, stuff like that. Instagram is where I'm mostly at, and that's it. Try to stay off the radar if I can.
Fantastic. Just let the work speak for itself, you know. So.
Yeah, I try. Stay out of trouble.
Listen, what I love though, I mean, before I go, you know, everything you've done is interesting. You know, like every project you've worked on, I think, is worthwhile. You know, it's like the art's always great. You're always trying something new. I love the fact you're just always yourself. You know, I think it's brilliant, and I think you've had great success, but you deserve it because you work really hard. You know, so like all power to you. You know,
I had a good teacher. I was glad to hook up with you and for you to answer my questions and to give me some advice. I'm really thankful for the people in my life. Not just the Netflix deal, but just I think your wisdom and being able to check in on you every now and then to see if you agree with this or that or all the stuff we talked about. It's nice to know that I'm not the only person trying to think ahead, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm always here, you know, give us a shout.
Yep. Great. When I see you, I'll buy you a drink, unless it's in your pub and then it could be on you. I'll go to your club like a gangster.
Listen, great talking to you. And I can't wait for this to go up. It'll be great, man.
You too, man. I'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
All the best then. See ya.
Ciao.
Okay, folks, that's it for this week. Don't forget, on sale this month, Magic Order Volume 4, Nemesis Reloaded, American Jesus, the big finale, Prodigy, the Icarus Society collection, and Nightclub for only $1.99. Thanks again for buying all the books, and I'll see you next Tuesday night.